Chapter 355. Bane looked at the Sword Saint, who had a complicated expression on his face, and remained silent for a long time. He knew that the Sword Saint didn't want to kill him, and the Sword Saint didn't even need to draw his sword to kill him. The Sword Saint only drew his sword to show his attitude. He had no way to resist. Under the Sword Saint's sword, he couldn't run away, and he couldn't die. Master Sword Saint, I just think that this will make you feel better. Are you telling yourself because you have no other choice? Bane sneered. Every man and woman in Jianghu knows this saying. You have no choice in Jianghu. Excuses. Bane took a step forward. The Sword Saint's sword moved back, but it was still 3 inches away from his throat. You're the Great Sword Saint. What do you mean by no choice? The Sword Saint sighed. What I'm doing now is, I don't want to force you. Then I'll have to trouble you, Sword Saint, to put your sword away. Bane said. I can't. Bane looked up at the sky, blinked, and calmed himself down. You can't succeed. You can't kill Jilin. Even if you can kill Jilin after you succeed, you won't be able to come out. This is our only chance. No matter what, we have to try. Otherwise, how can we be satisfied? Bane closed his eyes and nodded. He felt that he had nothing to say. Bane felt that people like the Sword Saint and Staya were the kind of people who could accomplish great feats, people who could leave a mark in the history of mankind. These people, they must have a strong will, and they would sacrifice themselves for the sake of the world. Or, to put it another way, these people wouldn't listen to others and weren't afraid of death. Bane knew that he couldn't change the mind of the Sword Saint. However, he did not want to lead a group of people to ambush Jilin. If the Sword Saint had taught Bane swordsmanship, then Jilin had saved Bane's life. It was easy to weigh which was more important. If Bane cared about the country and the people of the world, he wouldn't have gone to Lee Sin in the first place. Lord Sword Saint, if you want me to lead the way, I'm afraid you'd better think twice about it, Bane said seriously to Sword Saint after thinking for a moment. Why? Because maybe I will lead you into the nest of the elemental creatures. You also know that for someone like you, although that thing can't be considered strong and brainless, it's better in one word. Sword Saint was silent for a moment. He didn't expect Bane to be so resolute on this matter. Is the red disaster worth you standing against your own race? Lord Sword Saint, Jilin is an important friend of mine, Bane said seriously. But since Lord Sword Saint has spoken, I will naturally give you face. As for finding Jilin, compared to sneaking through Red Dragon City, there's a more convenient and direct path in front of you. What? Sword Saint was stunned. Look, Bane pointed to the sky in the west. Isn't that the most obvious path? Sword Saint said as he turned to look in the direction Bane pointed, thinking that it was indeed very obvious. It was a white pillar of light that reached the sky. It couldn't be more obvious between heaven and earth. Follow that pillar of light and fall straight down from the mouth of the volcano, and you will reach the bottom of Red Dragon City, the Red Dragon Palace. There's only Jilin and mountains of gold and treasures there. That volcano, Sword Saint frowned as he looked. That's right, we always thought that the Red Disaster would be hiding in the deepest part of Red Dragon City's labyrinth, but we didn't expect it to be in the most obvious place. Jilin never hides from anyone. Bane looked at Sword Saint and said, in my opinion, the most important thing that Jilin learned in the human empire is not to judge people by their beastly nature. And for us humans, if we want to understand Jilin, we should also learn not to judge beasts by their human nature. Dragons can learn how humans think, but humans can never learn to be beasts. Sword Saint said. Hee hee. Bane sneered. How do you know that you can't do it without trying? The reason humans don't want to try is because they think they are better than beasts. But sometimes calling humans beasts in human clothing is also an insult to beasts. My young friend, your words are a little inappropriate. How is it inappropriate? Jilin once said that in his eyes, beasts and beasts are not much different from humans. Only humans don't think so. Bane shrugged. Nonsense. Sword Saint snorted, put away his sword and left. How many years has it been since someone dared to speak to him like that? Phew. Bane looked at Sword Saint's back as he left and let out a long sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and found that his palms were also sweaty, and his forehead was even more damp. Bane thought to himself, Sir Sword Saint's sword intent is indeed oppressive. Talking to him always makes one feel like there's a blade at one's back. This time, in order to provoke Sword Saint, I've spoken so harshly. I've really put in a lot of effort. Bane calmed himself down and quickly ran towards the Church of Light. In the turbulent crowd, Bane dodged left and right. His figure was ethereal, and his speed was extremely fast. He was like a shadow hidden in the crowd, and also like a fish moving nimbly in the reefs under the sea. Bane was now a level 6 metahuman, so he could run very fast. It didn't take long for him to find Staya again in the Church of Light. In order to save time, Bane went through the window this time. Staya, I think your plan is great. Let's go. Bane grabbed Staya's wrist and dragged her out. Staya frowned, turned her wrist, and grabbed Bane's wrist. I can't leave now. To save the third prince, the Canon of Light is essential. I can only move around within the church. What's wrong with you? Let go. I won't let go. Bane didn't dare to struggle, and could only say quickly, Do you know why Sword Saint took me away just now? They want to kill Jilin. Kill Jilin? Staya frowned. Sword Saint said to bring a few hundred bright, snow mystical soldiers. Bane said, I understand. Staya pondered for a moment and immediately understood. She could roughly guess the plan of the humans. It was nothing more than a few legends breaking through the enemy's formation and delivering a few hundred bright snow mystical soldiers to Jilin without any damage. Then the bright snow mystical soldiers would kill Jilin. For this, they had to conserve their strength. In short, they had to know the right path. This path had to have the least number of enemies, and it had to be extremely hidden. There were only 3 people in the human race who knew about this path: Bane, Aisha, and herself. Therefore, Sword Saint actually came to find her. He just happened to meet Bane, and felt that Bane was more suitable to lead the way. So he took Bane with him. Thinking about this, Staya suddenly froze. She looked at Bane and asked, You told Sword Saint about the secret path? There was a secret path in Red Dragon City. The 3 of them knew about it. It was the only loophole left by the bad habits of the dwarves in Red Dragon City. It was a secret door on the city wall. No. Bane shook his head slowly. You didn't say that he would let you come back? Staya obviously didn't believe him, because I told him about another path. Which path? Stilla was taken aback. Looking at Bane's unconcealable smirk, a bad premonition quietly emerged in Stilla's mind. The path that's the easiest to recognize, but also the one that you can't take. Chapter 356. Jilin sat cross-legged and bathed in the holy light that reached the sky. The holy light washed back and forth in his body. That was the unparalleled holy power of light. It was a power that could heal everything. Jilin, on the other hand, was enveloped by this power for 3 days. Many of the injuries in his body had already healed. Only the wound on his chest was healing very slowly. Around the wound, one could clearly see a layer of hazy green light that did not dissipate. Although it was small in the dazzling holy light, it could still be seen clearly. That was the power of the Elven Queen. It was not so easy to heal. Around Jilin, the Red Dragon Palace, which no one was willing to come to, was now bustling with people and carriages. Huge carriages driven by dwarves and carrying a large number of injured orc soldiers lined up and walked into the Red Dragon Palace. They made a big circle in the Red Dragon Palace before walking out. During this time, they left behind a ground full of injured soldiers. These orcs were either covered in blood and on the verge of death or missing an arm or leg. Simply put, none of the injured soldiers who came to the Red Dragon Palace walked on their own. But the amazing thing was that these orcs could walk out on their own after a short while. Every one of them was in high spirits and had all 4 limbs. The miraculous scene of life and death, flesh and bones, appeared before Sing's eyes. Naturally, it had a great impact on him. Sing had never been so proud of himself for passing the throne of the Beast King to Jilin. Looking at the orc soldiers who kept walking out from his side, Sing was so excited that his body trembled. He wanted to kowtow to Jilin from the bottom of his heart. What's the situation on the battlefield now? Jilin's voice came from the holy light. Sing was shocked. Beast King, the humans have deployed a huge weapon with unparalleled power. The Dwarf King has used 5 god-slaying cannons to barely contend with it. Jilin was silent for a while after hearing Sing's words. The humans are improving really fast. 5 god-slaying cannons, and they're still at a disadvantage. Beast King, please rest assured and recuperate. The situation is still under control, Sing said with his head lowered. How far have you advanced to? Jilin asked. What's wrong? Cough, cough. Sing coughed guiltily. Because the Beast King's current situation is not stable, the Dwarf King and I have unanimously decided to shrink the battle line and fight steadily. So, the current battle line is at the border of the volcano. Jilin fell silent. Perhaps 2 years ago, he would have been fooled by Sing's words. But now, he was no longer the same as before. What Sing meant was that the Red forces have been beaten back by the humans. It was just a better way to put it. Why? Jilin expressed his surprise at the current situation. We've already dealt with the Third Prince and the mobile city. Logically speaking, beastmen with weapons and equipment should be much stronger than humans. How can we still be suppressed by humans? The golden spaceship of the Middle Empire, is a bit tricky to deal with. We beastmen haven't fought with it before, and the beastmen who can fly haven't found a good way to deal with it. Got it, Jilin said faintly. Wait until I've recovered, then I'll kill them all. But Sing was obviously doubtful. No problem, Jilin said. If the Elven Queen can shoot a second arrow, I'm afraid I'll be dead. Moreover, I'll be prepared in the future. She won't be able to hit me. Then, Beast King, how long will it take for you to recover? Give me another 4 days. During this time, don't fight with the humans anymore. There's no need for casualties now. If we want to defeat the humans, we must have enough numbers. Yes. Sing cupped his fists. Buzz, buzz. Sing suddenly felt a vibration coming from his waist. He was slightly stunned. Then, he took out an iron plate from his waist pocket. What's this? Jilin tilted his head. In reply to the Beast King, this is a new transmission artifact made by the dwarves. Jilin frowned slightly. The Dwarf King is really good. What's the matter? Sing listened for a while, then suddenly looked up. The Dwarf King said that a group of humans is rushing towards us. Their direction should be... Sing's expression suddenly became interesting. Instantly, his lion face looked honest and cute. Sing pointed to the sky blankly. They seem to want to invade Red Dragon City from this crater. Oh. Jilin could not help but laugh. He looked up at the sky outside the crater. He thought to himself that the humans' intelligence was really a fluctuating thing. Sometimes they were so smart that even he was surprised. Sometimes they were so stupid that it surprised him. Going straight to the root of the problem sounded very imposing and seemed to save a lot of trouble. However, one wrong move could easily turn them into walking into a trap. Knowing that there were tigers on the mountain, they still walked towards the Tiger Mountain. Only those who could come down from the Tiger Mountain could be called heroes. Those who could not come down were the stubborn and stupid passers-by that the waiter at the restaurant at the foot of the mountain used to persuade the customers to take a detour. Jilin really did not understand where those humans got their confidence from. Once he was injured, those arrogant humans became hot-blooded. It was time for them to wake up. The dignity of the Megalosaurus could not be violated by mere humans, even when it was on the brink of death. Moreover, Jilin believed that he was far from being on the brink of death. Are they here? Jilin looked up. A group of human figures jumped into the white light pillar one after another like sharp arrows. The strong white light perfectly covered their figures, however, Jilin could see them. Because Jilin had excellent eyesight. Moreover, this light was originally from him. Jilin sighed softly. Now, the surroundings of the crater had been dug up from top to bottom by the dwarves. Neat caves were dug near the crater. Wounded beastmen soldiers were placed everywhere. The Red Dragon Palace was not the only place where the orcs received treatment. If the humans were to come in, the orc soldiers would suffer heavy casualties. Just as Jilin was thinking, Sing's roar suddenly sounded. Red Dragon City. Prepare to face the enemy. War mode activated. Following Sing's roar, a series of roars sounded one after another. Stone walls kept falling down, completely isolating the caves from the crater, perfectly protecting the beastmen warriors. Since the dwarves had dug a cave, naturally it was not just a simple cave. If they did not do something to show off their abilities, how could they live up to the reputation of the dwarves? Jilin was also very surprised. Looking at the flowing light and the flashing symbols on the stone walls, he suddenly had some confidence in the sturdiness of the stone walls. Unknowingly, the Red Dragon Palace had stopped sending in the injured. The injured soldiers that were sent in earlier also walked out one after another. The battlefield had been cleared. When the last soldier stood up, Jilin stopped his hand seal, and his floating body landed on the ground. The towering white light pillar gradually faded until it disappeared. Everything in the crater suddenly became clear. The figures of Sword Saint and the others appeared. They were standing on a protruding stone wall in the crater. It seemed like they wanted to quietly come down, quietly approach Jilin, and then ambush him. Jilin quietly looked at the legends, and the legends returned Jilin's gaze. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Chapter 357. The pillar of light suddenly disappeared, and they suddenly looked at each other. It was a moment of silence. It was because Jilin was full of confidence, and also because the humans were caught off guard. Everyone had different opinions about this short moment of silence. In the face of my immense might, these humans are completely terrified. Jilin thought to himself, we bear the fate of humanity and the world on our backs, and finally stand in front of the Red Calamity. We are calm, and our gazes are as sharp as knives. We are about to start an epic battle. War King looked at Jilin, his eyes surging with fighting spirit. The current situation is very awkward. We are like thieves sneaking into a dark house in the middle of the night. We thought that the owner was asleep, but we didn't expect that the owner would turn on the lights as soon as we entered. It's really awkward. The Pope would describe this moment of silence to others countless times over the years. Jilin landed on his mountain of treasures and changed into a comfortable posture, straightforwardly expressing the fact that he didn't care about these humans at all. He raised his index finger and pointed at the pair of humans. A sword user, a fighter, a white-haired one, and son of God. They're quite complete. The Red Calamity has discovered us. The Pope said softly. Nonsense. Sword Saint turned around and rolled his eyes at the Pope. Why is it white-haired when it comes to me? Is that a characteristic? Shut up. Musin also turned around and glared at the Pope. The Son of God is my ancestor. War King looked at Jilin and said, I only have the bloodline of the gods that was passed down. What are you people doing here? Jilin licked his sharp teeth. If you're here to die, why come so far? Red Calamity, we're here to kill you today. Sword Saint pointed his sword at Jilin. With just this sword, he fully displayed the style of a master. I know that. Jilin grinned as if he was laughing. But with your little strength, aren't you overestimating yourselves? A bunch of ants. How are you going to kill me? Of course. The Pope said, of course we won't kill you just like that. We've prepared a greeting gift for you. Take a look, Red Calamity. This is the power of humans. Bright snow, divine weapon. As the Pope yelled, many green light spots appeared in the red sky of Red Dragon City. They fell towards the Red Dragon Palace like meteors. In the blink of an eye, a few hundred human-sized bright snow, godly soldiers filled the crater of the volcano, their bodies emitting green light. The golden light in Jilin's eyes congealed, and a rare solemn look appeared on his face. He was too familiar with this thing. When this thing first appeared in the Snow Wind Empire, it split his great fireball technique into two with its own strength. Later on, when they arrived at the Qiankuan Great Array, Jilin personally repaired thousands of bright snow divine weapons. Relying on the great power of the explosion, the god's body was covered in wounds. This thing had the power to harm gods. Dragon breath. All of a sudden, Jilin released his dragon breath into the sky. The red, high-temperature beam instantly filled the entire crater of the volcano. In such a narrow space like the crater of the volcano, the humans had nowhere to hide. After 2 or 3 seconds, Jilin slowly closed his mouth. Black burn marks appeared on the walls of the crater of the volcano. There was only one exception. It was the protruding stone wall where the humans were standing. Hundreds of bright snow divine weapons were arranged in a strange semicircle, forming a semicircle barrier that completely protected the humans. Despicable. The Pope yelled at Jilin. Why did you suddenly start fighting? Oh, didn't we already exchange greetings? Jilin said. Jilin was a little unhappy in his heart. He had clearly cooperated with these humans, but they still wanted a yard after taking an inch. Beast King, those human weapons can form a barrier. The Dwarf King's god-slaying cannon was blocked by those things. Sing saw that Jilin was a little shocked. He said in a deep voice, "Can they block the god-slaying cannon?" Jilin glanced at Sing. "Why don't you wait until tomorrow?" Huh? Sing was stunned. "Nothing." Jilin waved his hand. He was too lazy to talk to him. Then, he pulled out the dragon scale sword. Jilin raised the sword with both hands. He flapped his wings and soared into the sky. He charged toward the green hemisphere. He suddenly slashed with the sword. The huge sword that was almost 100 meters long cut through the air. It whistled as if it had the power to split the sky and earth. This was the result of Jilin taking into account that there was not enough space in the crater of the volcano. Clang! With a loud bang, the volcano began to shake violently. The magma under the Red Dragon Palace started to churn violently. It was like a turbulent sea. 3 or 4 bright snow divine weapons suddenly lost all their light and fell from the green hemisphere. They fell into the magma with a bang and turned into green smoke. So that was it. The creations of humans were still inferior to the gods. Jilin's face suddenly revealed a smug and dangerous expression. Then, he began to wave the dragon scale sword in his hand. The dragon scale sword landed on the green light sphere like a storm. A few bright, snow divine weapons fell from the light sphere from time to time. Is it injured? The Pope frowned. What should we do? I didn't expect the Red Calamity to be so powerful. Musin asked. We've wasted too much time. No one expected it to recover so quickly. Sword Saint patted Musin's shoulder, indicating that he did not need to be so frustrated. This was indeed something that no one could have predicted. Should we fight or run? Sword Saint looked around and asked. The Red Calamity is injured after all. Warlord looked at the nightmarish Jilin outside the barrier. Not only was he not afraid, he could even see a hint of pretense in Jilin's storm-like attacks. He made his stance clear with one sentence. I agree, Warlord. Musin was the first to speak. Even if this isn't the best timing, it's our only chance. Guy Mingwes said in a deep voice. Sigh. The Pope let out a sigh. That's true. If we leave without doing anything after coming here, it would be a little embarrassing. The 4 of them looked at each other. Although they had different identities and personalities, their eyes were filled with determination. To fight or to run, there was no need to ask this question. This was because they had already seen their own ending before coming here. They were all prepared to die. This was because even if they could kill Jilin, they could not kill their way out of the Red Dragon Palace after the battle. For someone like Sing, they could ignore him if he had a bright snow divine weapon. But if he did not, the only person who could possibly survive this operation was the Battle King. Everyone had already given up on the idea of risking their lives. They only asked this question to encourage themselves. Get into formation, Zhan Wang shouted. The green light spheres scattered and turned into a huge green firework. The 4 of them took the opportunity to spread out. Then, they firmly occupied the 4 positions around Jilin. The hundreds of bright snow divine weapons split into 4 and gathered around the 4 of them. Then, they gradually transformed into 4 huge green light swords. The 4 of them each occupied the position of the sword tip. They looked at Jilin and shouted in unison. Celestial Slaying Sword Formation. What the hell is this? Jilin was shocked. His face was filled with astonishment. Chapter 358. Immortal Slaying Sword Formation. What kind of joke is this group of humans playing? Jilin looked at the 4 green light swords that were slightly shabby compared to this name and really didn't know what to say. To be honest, these humans really stunned him. The Immortal Slaying Sword Formation. This thing really did exist in Jilin's bloodline inheritance. According to legend, it was the #1 killing formation in the universe that could destroy the heavens and earth, killing gods and Buddhas in their way. According to the description in Jilin's bloodline inheritance, using this killing formation to kill him seemed to be a bit of a waste. Logically speaking, as soon as this killing formation was set up, Jilin should have instantly turned into dust. But no, Jilin was still standing here. What did this mean? This immortal slaying sword formation was fake. These humans were completely making things up. When Jilin thought of this, he only felt 2 flames burning in his eyes. However, this was the truth. When 2 sounds and the others saw 2 clusters of golden flames appear in Jilin's eyes with a bang, they were a little confused for a moment. They thought, what kind of new move is this from Red Disaster? Why haven't I seen it before? They also didn't expect that Jilin was completely angered by them. Immortal slaying sword formation? Jilin was so angry that he laughed. Where did you hear this name? Sword Saint said aloud. This is a secret of the Middle Empire. Jilin snorted in disdain. Is this how you set up the immortal slaying sword formation? To set up the immortal slaying sword formation, at least have the immortal slaying sword. What's the use of just these puppets? Where's your immortal slaying sword? Everyone fell silent. They didn't expect Red Disaster to suddenly discuss the immortal slaying sword formation with them. Moreover, they also knew that as a dragon, Jilin would not easily lie, and there was no need to lie. Since the Red Disaster said so, there was a high chance that it was true. The 3 of them looked at Sword Saint. The Sword Saint slowly shook his head, indicating that he had never heard of the Sword of Execution. However, since it was a sword that even Red Calamity knew about, as a Sword Saint, he naturally couldn't just leave it at that. What kind of sword is the Zhu Xian sword? Was it powerful? Does the Zhu Immortal sword have to be used to set up the Zhu Immortal Grand Formation? The Sword Saint asked. Not really, Jilin said after thinking for a while. Oh, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't necessary, it wasn't a big problem. However, before everyone could feel relieved, they heard Jilin continue. Other than the Celestial Eradication Sword, there's also the Celestial Entrapping Sword, the Celestial Culling Sword, the Celestial Eradication Sword, and the Celestial Eradication Sword. Nonsense! The Sword Saint roared. The immortal punishing formation has been passed down for thousands of years in the Middle Empire. Immortal punishing swords and formation diagrams have never been heard of before. Red Calamity, cut the crap and die. Jilin licked his fangs. He kind of understood. Perhaps the Zhu Immortal Sword formation that the one with the sword spoke of had nothing to do with the Zhu Immortal Sword formation that he understood. Maybe the humans of this world who created this formation felt that their formation was capable of destroying heaven and earth. Killing immortals and gods would be a cinch, so the name Zhu Immortal was appropriate and named it that way. It was purely a coincidence. He was thinking too much, but then again, even if the world was different, the humans' desire to kill immortals and gods was still the same. Just as Jilin's imagination was running wild, the humans had already launched their attack. The Zhu Immortal Sword formation was activated. The 4 green swords of light cooperated with each other. The formation was mysterious and powerful. The swords flashed from time to time, condensing into lines, covering the entire space of the formation. The lines condensed from the swords were extremely thin, but also extremely sharp, as if they could cut everything within the formation into dust. And the range of this formation just so happened to cover the entire volcanic crater. Jilin couldn't avoid it. Fighting for a geographical advantage has always been a human's obsession and instinct. In just a few breaths of time, Jilin's body had already been hit by dozens of swords. His scales made clanging sounds. The power of hundreds of bright, snow-divine weapons compressed together into lines was not to be underestimated. Jilin felt that if he stayed here for half a day without moving, it might really be dangerous. With that thought, Jilin raised his dragon scale sword. The long and narrow pupils in his golden eyes became even smaller. This meant that Jilin was carefully observing. He was looking. Gradually, Jilin saw the formation diagram of the Zhu immortal sword formation. He's about to make a move. Muzin shouted. Jilin was about to make a move. Everyone could see that. The reason why the king of fighters shouted this was because it was a secret signal. I didn't expect him to use his trump card so quickly. The Pope mumbled softly. Then, the Pope took out a purple crystal from his white Pope robe. Jilin frowned. He felt that this scene was extremely familiar. This action of taking out a purple crystal was clearly exclusive to Aisha. The Pope crushed the crystal. The purple crystal turned into sparkling dust that filled the sky and instantly covered Jilin's surroundings. Jilin felt that it was even more familiar. He did not understand why this white-haired guy and Aisha liked to crush crystals like this. Taboo scripture. The Pope made a gesture of the Church of Light. Holy light rose around him like flames. He slowly opened his eyes, which were also shining with holy light. The dazzling holy light turned his white hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes into a bright golden color. The Pope at this moment was incomparably holy. He really was the representative of the God of Light. The Pope looked at Jilin and slowly said, Temple of Light. At this moment, the Pope's voice had completely changed. It became grand and solemn. It was as if the God of Light had used his mouth to transmit his voice. The radiant God's temple appeared and completely enveloped Crimson Lin. The eight-winged God of Light sat upright on the divine throne and pointed at Red Lin from afar. In an instant, the world was empty. The wind was gone, the water was gone, and the fire was gone. Everything was gone. Only the light existed. Jilin suddenly felt that he could not move. It was not the kind of immobility where he was restrained. It was the kind of immobility where he could not control his own body. However, he could still feel it. He could still feel the feeling of the green light falling on his body. Jilin suddenly understood why he could not move. It was because there was no time here. This was the temple of the God of Light. There was only the law of the God of Light here. It did not even have the most basic law of time. It was a pity that the caster was a human. Taboo scripture? Warlord glanced at the Pope. I didn't expect the Church of Light to have such a technique. They really hit it well. They can actually imprison the red disaster. How shocking, Sword Saint said. You, the Pope, actually know how to use witches' techniques. Muzin's eyes were sharp. He did not miss the dazzling purple crystal. Stop talking nonsense. The Pope said, I won't be able to use this technique for long. The Pope gestured for them to attack quickly. At the same time, blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Even as the Pope, he had only learned the taboo scripture not long ago. Only now did he realize that there was a reason why the taboo scripture was listed as a taboo. Chapter 359. Following the Pope's voice, the celestial slaying sword once again launched a fierce attack. Like hailstones, it continuously landed on Jilin's body, producing loud bangs. Sing's eyes turned red as he watched from below. He roared from time to time, but he did not act rashly. This was because he clearly knew that even if he sacrificed his life, it would be insignificant to both sides. The hundreds of bright snow divine soldiers behind the four of them were all much stronger than him. Furthermore, he could not block a single one of the green rays that landed on Jilin's body. Perhaps if Muzin were to divert his attention and give him some of the rays, he would be severely injured. Beast King, Sing anxiously shouted. Don't panic, a calm voice sounded, and everyone could not help but be stunned. Even the rain-like green rays paused. This was because that was Jilin's voice. In the Temple of Light, where there were no laws of time, Jilin actually moved and could even speak. Impossible. The Pope's pupils shrunk to the size of a needle. Clearly, this had a huge impact on him. How did you move without time? You're just a mere human. Don't be too arrogant. Jilin slowly tightened his wings and placed his sword in front of his chest. Slowly, following a mysterious trajectory, he slashed out with the sword that cut through the river of time. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of the sword being unsheathed, a straight and thin crack appeared on the Temple of Light. Jilin's sword had actually split the entire Temple of Light into two from middle. The Temple of Light slowly separated, and the evil megalosaurus that was trapped within was about to regain its freedom. It would bring endless blood and fire to the living beings on this land. Pope? The warlord shouted loudly. The current situation was very different from what they had predicted. The Pope ignored the warlord because he had nothing to say at this moment, and there was nothing he could do. Furthermore, he still thought that he was innocent. Just like how you brought a few teammates to go up the mountain to catch a bear. You set up traps near the bear's cave and even brought the sturdiest net. You were just waiting for the bear to come out. In the end, after the bear came out, it looked at you, extended a pair of wings, and flew away. How could you be blamed for this? This could only be blamed on that flying bear. It was too unreasonable. Finally, Jilin fully spread its wings under the Pope's strenuous support. The Temple of Light shattered. The eyes of the four people were all covered with a layer of shadow. At this point, the legendary plan to slay the dragon could be said to have been mostly destroyed. A few hundred bright snow divine soldiers. We still have a fighting chance. Sword Saint shouted. I'm afraid it's still a little difficult to kill the red disaster, Musin hurriedly said. Why don't we stake everything and take a gamble? The other three fell silent for a moment. They all understood what the Fist Emperor meant. Sword Saint was the first to speak. That's quite straightforward. The Pope laughed bitterly. If that's the case, I'm afraid I won't even know if I've won or lost. But this is the method with the highest chance of success. If we try our best and still can't get rid of the red disaster, we can only say that this is the will of the heavens. Forget it. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. War King looked at the red disaster and gritted his teeth. There are countless heroes in the world, but who can care about what happens after they die? Bright snow, divine soldiers, prepare to self-destruct. You guys are talking to yourselves. You're having a good time. Jilin looked coldly at these humans. He was furious and let out a cruel sneer. It seemed like these people really didn't take him seriously. Jilin was all too familiar with the bright snow, divine soldiers. It could even be said that there was no creature in this world that was more familiar with the bright snow divine soldiers than Jilin. He had seen the real bright snow divine soldiers from the mythological era in the universe world. Furthermore, Jilin had pieced together a few thousand usable bright snow divine soldiers from the wreckage on the ground. These were just replicas of the current humans. However, because of this understanding, Jilin was also somewhat fearful. He knew how terrifying the power of the self-destruction of this thing was. He had once used this thing's self-destruction to cause his divine body to be filled with cracks. Jilin didn't think that he could be stronger than that thing. Even when it was covered in wounds and cracks, he had still broken a few of his nails and teeth when fighting it. Therefore, when he saw these things, Jilin was wary of the human's move. Jilin believed that he had a perfect countermeasure against the self-destruction of the bright snow divine soldiers. Before the bright snow divine soldiers self-destructed, there would be a pause of 4 to 5 seconds. This was because they needed a process of energy flowing back to the core. For humans, these 4 to 5 seconds might not be able to do anything. However, for Jilin, it was enough for him to do many things. For example, use a spell, dragon language spell, and a fire. Jilin didn't know many dragon language spells. To be more precise, he only knew this one. However, it was also his most powerful move. This was a spell that could open up a fire domain. It was the law of burning everything. A dragon's roar rang out. Jilin's domain covered the entire volcano. There weren't many other elements to begin with, but they were completely burned. The domain instantly became a space filled with only fire elements. In such a space, Jilin was the only god, the only ruler. Jilin looked at these bright snow divine soldiers. With a thought, the bright snow divine soldiers suddenly burst into flames, and they burned extremely quickly. It was as if these human-killing weapons weren't made of steel, but made of butter. The bright snow divine soldiers didn't even self-destruct before they melted into pools of molten iron. It was like a yellow rain. The raindrops were huge, falling into the lava lake below, splashing countless red flowers. The air was filled with the smell of melting steel. What? Sword Saint looked at Jilin and asked. He didn't know why Jilin didn't kill them immediately. If he could melt the bright snow divine soldiers, he could easily melt them as well. Jilin flicked his fingers. Don't worry, I still have a special impression of humans like you. As intelligent creatures, if you can't even feel death in the end, wouldn't that be too sad? You mean, you won't let us die too easily? The Pope asked. At this moment, his face and hair had become even paler. That's not what I meant, but you can understand it that way. Jilin pointed at the Pope. Let's start with you. As Jilin's finger moved, countless fire elements began to move towards the Pope. The Pope could feel a shadow slowly enveloping his entire body, even his soul. Once this shadow completely engulfed him, it would mean the arrival of death. To be able to clearly feel death approaching you step by step was not a good feeling for any human. So this is the feeling of death. What a wicked dragon. Chapter 360. The feeling of death slowly crept in, and a great fear crept towards the Pope. As his life was about to end, the Pope let out a long sigh in his heart. After living for more than 200 years and standing at the peak of the human race for so many years, the Pope thought that he had seen through life and death, and was even a little tired of living. Unexpectedly, there was still an instinctive fear in his heart, and a trace of regret. Forget it. From a moment the Pope realized that death was coming to him to calmly accept it, he only took a very short time to adjust his state of mind. His mind was firm, and he did not fear death. In the eyes of humans, this was a great person, a person who could do great things. Although His Highness the Pope acted frivolously and strangely all his life, he lived up to his name. Jilin looked at the Pope, who had calmed down, and his eyelids twitched. That was why he did not like humans. Could a creature who could overcome its instincts with its mind still be considered a creature? Thinking about it seriously, perhaps they were just a group of monsters that occupied the world in a vast number of numbers. There are thousands of species in the world. How could humans walk on two legs? If humans called a minority as monsters, then how could the 1 in a million two-legged land creatures not be called monsters? It turned out that humans were the largest and most numerous monsters in the world. Compared to them, the dragon race was more like the original creatures of the world. Jilin looked at the dying Pope and gained an inexplicable sense of superiority in a short moment. The Pope's white robe began to burn. The other three wanted to help the Pope, but within Jilin's domain, they could not do anything at all. The Pope's death had become a certainty in the future. That was what everyone thought. Bang! A soft sound came from behind the Pope. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Jilin also narrowed his eyes. He did not know what unexpected things could happen in his domain. A purple flame suddenly ignited behind the Pope's back. It expanded rapidly and instantly enveloped the Pope. The purple flame burned fiercely. Finally, from the embers of the flame, only a circular piece of cloth slowly floated down. The Pope was nowhere to be seen. Jilin's eyes narrowed so much that it looked like they were about to close. He was now completely dumbfounded. The moment the purple flames ignited, Jilin gave the command to extinguish. However, the flames did not extinguish. There was actually a Hua Yin that didn't listen to his orders in his domain. This was undoubtedly a big deal for Jilin. Jilin took the round tattered cloth and glanced at it. The golden light in Jilin's eyes suddenly brightened. The outside of the cloth, which was originally white, had long been burned black like charcoal. As for the inside, it was as good as new. Because on the inside of the cloth, there was a magic array embroidered with extremely thin threads. The silk thread was so thin that if one didn't know beforehand, they probably wouldn't be able to feel it even if they used their hands to touch it. If the Pope were to wear it, it would be even harder to detect it. Jilin understood everything, but he still couldn't accept it. At this moment, the biggest thought in Jilin's mind was, Aisha, you actually have such skills? Are you a good wife and mother? When it came to magic arrays, one couldn't be the slightest bit off. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. But Aisha could actually embroider such a powerful teleportation magic array with needle and thread. What kind of craftsmanship was this? Perhaps even the best embroiderer in the world would secretly wipe away 2 drops of crystal-clear tears and secretly sigh at their inferiority when they saw this work. Jilin looked at this magic array and couldn't help but marvel at Aisha's genius idea. A teleportation magic array could be used in the form of combustion. No wonder it could still be used in my domain. No wonder this flame didn't listen to my orders. But then again, even if Aisha was exceptionally talented and had superb craftsmanship, how much effort did it take to embroider such a magic array? She really put in a lot of effort and care. Why didn't I notice it before? This thread seems to be hair. Jilin was suddenly shocked. Jilin knew how much Aisha treasured her hair. It could be said that she really fought for every hair. Back when she taught Bane the magic to summon Xiaohei, she didn't even bear to use a single strand of her hair. According to her, her body would no longer grow. For things like hair, pulling out a strand was equivalent to losing a strand of hair. In other words, a peerless beauty like Aisha actually had the risk of going bald. Just thinking about it was cruel. But Aisha was actually willing to use her hair for the Pope. Heaven and earth moved. But when he thought about how Aisha embroidered her hair into the Pope's clothes, why did it feel a little creepy when he thought about it? Jilin's tail couldn't help but tremble as he thought about it. When he thought about how the Pope almost lost his life in his hands, Jilin really felt a little guilty. Forget it. If that's the case, then so be it. What a scary woman. That one ran away, these 3. Jilin turned to look at Sword Saint and the others. Do you have any escape cards? Jilin asked. If you do, then hurry up and use them. Sword Saint and the other 2 were silent. It seemed like they didn't have any. Jilin nodded in satisfaction. Red Calamity. Suddenly, a loud shout came from the sky above. Jilin looked up and saw an extremely dazzling human standing at the mouth of the volcano. Her long hair was as bright as gold, and her face was beautiful. But she also had a resolute look. Her body was slender, and she wore a full body white armor. But even so, it couldn't hide her curvaceous body. In her hand was a sword that emitted a huge light. Even Jilin felt that the sword was somewhat dazzling, because that was the holy sword that the god of light had personally bestowed upon the world. The person shouted and ignored the volcano's height of a few hundred meters and jumped down from the mouth of the volcano. Dawn! The person stood steadily in front of Jilin. The volcanic rocks under her feet shattered into countless pieces. She looked up at Jilin without a trace of fear in her eyes. She was majestic, like a heavenly soldier descending from the heavens. A peerless hero was nothing more than this. This person's jump made Jilin tremble in fear. He hurriedly withdrew his territory. Jilin thought to himself, at such a high distance, you would have fallen into the lava lake if you jumped a little bit off. Such a heroic entrance could be said to be perfect. But unfortunately, the hero's follower was too embarrassing. At this time, she was climbing down the volcano's wall bit by bit. She looked wretched, like a thief. Red Calamity, I'm the princess of the Simai Empire, the holy maiden of the light, Staya. Today, under the orders of the god of light, I will take your life with my holy sword to save the world. Die. Staya pointed her sword at the Megalosaurus and looked very confident. Bane finally climbed down from the wall. He rushed half a step behind Staya and pointed at Jilin. That's right, die. Chapter 361. Jilin lowered his head and placed it very close to Staya. Staya could even clearly see her and Bane's reflections in the golden dragon eyes, as well as the tiny scales on Jilin's eyelids. Staya suddenly had an evil thought. Could she blind Jilin's eyes if she stabbed him with her sword? After hesitating for a while, Staya didn't try. Since Jilin placed his eyes so close to her, it meant that Jilin didn't even care about her. How dare you come back, human? Jilin looked at Bane. Speak. Where did you hide her? Being stared at by Jilin's threatening gaze, Bane, who thought he had gotten used to the dragon aura, couldn't move at all. His whole body was stiff. Staya stepped in front of Bane and held her sword in the middle. She was like a rock in the middle of a river. She sliced the dragon aura that was like a tidal wave in the middle. Bane finally let out a sigh of relief. You're such a big dragon. and you have so many demons and monsters under your command in the Red Dragon City. Why are you bullying a weak girl? Aren't you afraid that people will laugh at you and ruin the reputation of the dragon race? I'm doing this for your own good." He touched his huge lion head, and his bell-like eyes were filled with confusion. He thought to himself that there were no demons and monsters in the Red Dragon City. A cold laugh came from Jilin's mouth. He made up his mind that if this human couldn't return the princess, he would definitely kill him. Gulp. Bane swallowed a big mouthful of saliva, and his legs couldn't stop shaking. It seemed like this wasn't going to end so easily. "Master Sword Saint, Master Fist King, protect the warlord and leave first. Leave the red disaster to me." Staya turned her head and said hurriedly, "Oh yeah, where's the Pope?" Sword Saint and the others frowned and didn't say anything. The first half of the Saint's sentence was very problematic, but when the second half of the sentence came out, they couldn't ask any questions. "What's wrong?" Staya looked at Sword Saint. The Sword Saint shifted his gaze to Jilin's right claw. Staya followed Sword Saint's gaze, and her entire body trembled. Jilin's claws were grabbing a pitch-black cloth. The cloth was burned beyond recognition, and it was impossible to tell what it was. However, when she thought about how Sword Saint and the others looked like they wanted to say something, Staya understood. "You burned His Highness the Pope to death," Staya blurted out. But as soon as the words left her mouth, Staya felt that something was wrong. If Jilin was the one who burned her death, how could there be such a piece of cloth left? As expected, Jilin shook his head. "It wasn't me, it was Aisha." Jilin handed the cloth to Staya and showed Staya the magic circle that Aisha made herself. It was truly a miracle. Staya felt that the pattern on the cloth was familiar and instinctively reached out to take it. In that short moment, Jilin suddenly reached behind Staya and grabbed Bane. Hey. Bane turned pale with fright. "Jilin, let's talk this out. Calm down." "Jilin, let him go," Staya yelled. But Jilin couldn't hear what Staya was saying. Seeing this traitor, Jilin was furious. He thought that this place was perfect for imprisoning a human. In the end, it was leaked from the hands of this traitor. He was the only human in Red Dragon City. "Tell me, where is he?" Jilin grabbed Bane and pressed his thumb on Bane's head. His meaning was obvious. Gentler. Bane yelled. He looked embarrassed and pathetic. He didn't look like the Shadow at all. He was like the first batch of traitors when 2 countries were at war. He had no integrity at all. Sword Saint and the others felt their cheeks heat up. They couldn't bear to look at him. Normally, to the king of fighters and warlord, Bane was just a stranger, a foreigner, and weak. Everything about him had nothing to do with them. But in front of the red disaster, all humans could be counted as one of their own. Seeing how cowardly his own race was, Warlord's face darkened. But Bane couldn't care less about that now. He didn't care if anyone looked down on him. Jilin, he's in Aisha's hands. Facing Jilin's threat, Bane didn't even want to hold on for a second. He gave his orders without hesitation. Jilin nodded. This answer was similar to what he thought. People like Aisha wouldn't let go of anyone or anything that was in her hands unless she squeezed all the value out of them. "Then where's Aisha?" Jilin asked. Bane shook his head. When he came out, he was teleported out. He didn't know where the underground room was. "Okay," Jilin sneered. "Then why should I keep you? I can help you find Aisha," Bane said hurriedly. "You?" Jilin said disdainfully. "If you could find her, would she have been able to do evil all these years?" "Xiaohei. There's Xiaohei." Bane quickly said the excuse that he had prepared beforehand. "Xiaohei was someone with my hair. Now that Aisha is with her all the time, you can find her through me." Jilin was silent for a moment. Finding Aisha through a little crow. He couldn't deny this. If it was true, it would be too easy. But no matter what, it was still feasible. Although the possibility of success was very low, there was no harm in trying. "How we find her?" Jilin asked. "The Church of Light developed a secret technique during the war with the witches. If we can find the witches through the tamed demons, we can also do it the other way around." Staya said, "But it has to be alive." Hearing Staya's words, Jilin didn't have much hope. Since it was the Church of Light's traditional secret technique, Aisha had to be on guard, but it was still worth a try. Okay, let's try. Jilin finally put Bane down. Bane was still in shock, but he let out a long sigh of relief. Then these three. Jilin glanced at Sword Saint and the others. Now that Ming Shui's heavenly weapon had exploded, they had nothing to rely on in front of Jilin. You can't touch these three. Staya took a step forward, full of vigor. Leave now. Sword Saint and the others paused for a moment, then turned around and left. They turned into 3 rays of light and dashed towards the crater. They heard the conversation between Jilin and Staya. The 3 of them agreed that the Saint of Light should be fine. Jilin was stunned. He didn't know where Staya got her confidence from. You came to the Red Dragon Palace to cause trouble, and you think you can leave just like that? Jilin, stop! Staya jumped high in front of Jilin, holding the holy sword high, as if she could cut everything in half. Jilin held his breath. He had to stop the dragon breath that he was about to spit out. Jilin held back, but Staya attacked decisively and cleanly. Clang! Her sword hit Jilin's nose. It was the sound of metal hitting stone. Staya flew backwards. Her hands were numb and trembling. Jilin also took half a step back. What was Staya trying to do? He really didn't understand. Chapter 362. Jilin narrowed his eyes and looked up. Sword Saint and the other 2 had long disappeared from the sky. The 3 of them disappeared in the blink of an eye like graceful birds. They ran so fast. Sing, chase after them and kill them. Jilin waved his hand and shouted. He signaled Sing to chase after them. Although the lives of Sword Saint and the others were insignificant to him, it did not matter whether they were dead or alive. However, if he really let these troublemakers escape unscathed, Jilin would feel very uncomfortable in his heart. Don't worry, Beast King, Sing shouted and left with his sword. He was very confident about this mission, and it was exactly what he had been looking for. The king of fighters, Musin, and the warlord had been suppressing the orcs for so many years. Today, they finally had a chance to be proud. Stop! Staya panicked and blocked Sing. She could not let Sing chase after the warlord and the others. If it was a normal situation, the warlord and the king of fighters, Sword Saint, would be the strongest fighting force of the humans. Not to mention Sing, they would not even be afraid of any 3 legends. However, the 3 of them had just finished fighting with Jilin. All of them were severely injured, and their organs were damaged. Moreover, they were in Mount Gerda. They had the bright snow god weapon to protect them, but now they had to constantly defend against the attacks. In such a situation, the ordinary guards outside Red Dragon City were already an inescapable net. Once Sing caught up, the 3 of them would be in a very dangerous situation. Fire cage. A golden light flashed in Jilin's eyes. 2 cages formed by flames were instantly formed, trapping Staya and Bane. Staya instinctively took a step back. Sing took the opportunity and rushed out. Sing took out his microphone as he ran. Dwarf King, Musin, and the warlord are running away. Stop them. Damn it. Staya instantly slashed out countless times. The fire cage kept shaking. However, it could not hold on any longer after a few seconds. It collapsed with a shattering sound. However, in just a few seconds, Staya had already lost the chance to stop Sing. Jilin. Staya pointed her sword at Jilin. Stop. Jilin blinked his eyes, feeling very puzzled. Where did this come from? Why are you holding this sword? Jilin asked. Do you know that this sword can't even pierce through my scales? Didn't Bane tell you what happened to the last human who held this sword? At that time, his face was filled with despair, as if he had been deceived by the whole world. Even I couldn't help but sympathize with him. Enough. That's not how you use the word sympathy. Staya was furious. Many of the human vocabulary that Jilin knew were taught by Staya, but now Staya had the feeling of regret. It was like an old boxer teaching all his skills to his disciple. However, the disciple mastered the skills and went to cause trouble in the world in the blink of an eye. Regret. Staya calmed herself down and looked at Jilin seriously. She said earnestly, Jilin, this war is endless. We have to stop it. Jilin did not care. Give him to me. No, Stias said. Jilin was dazed. Then why should we stop? Because you can't achieve the final victory. It's pointless to fight now, Stias said. Jilin said with disdain. After I recover completely, we will win completely. The humans will be at my mercy. But you can't kill all the humans, Stias said faintly. I have the orcs and dwarves, Jilin said. It's the same. You can't kill all of them. Steve fixed her gaze on Jilin. There was not a trace of hesitation or wavering in her eyes. It was as if her words were a truth that did not need to be discussed in this world. So cool. Bane in the fire cage looked at Staya, who didn't waver at all. He felt that he lost again. Facing Staya like this, even Jilin didn't have the ability to refute her. Jilin thought for a while. He looked at Staya and said slowly, How do you want to stop? Half a day later, in the human camp, there was a sea of people, and the endless campsite was quiet. However, the atmosphere in the enormous allied human army was so gloomy that it couldn't be any worse. The sound of the soldiers training, the loud voice of the officers arranging the defense, and the clanging sound of the meals being prepared in the past all became soft at this moment. Many soldiers didn't know what happened, but their sharp senses trained on the battlefield made them realize that something was wrong today. Therefore, each and every one of them was very careful and could even be said to be trembling in fear. In the camp of the cooks, a thin young man from the Middle Empire was sitting on a small wooden chair. He was wearing a red cloth shirt. In front of him, there were a few pots of potatoes that were piled up like a mountain. The young man looked at the potatoes in his hand attentively. He was holding a special peeling knife. His wrist shook and the knife flashed. The potatoes were stripped of their outer layers as they tumbled. The young man looked at the naked potatoes in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. He put the potatoes into the big pot filled with water behind him and took a potato. His movements were natural and unrestrained, all done in one go. Old Wong, what do you think is going on today? It's almost time to eat. Why is it so quiet? The young man asked without raising his head. Although he was talking, he didn't stop working. At the entrance of the cook's camp, an old man was sitting on the stairs. He was holding a pipe. His body was covered in oil, and his hair was messy. He looked up and glanced at the young man. Kid, how long have you been in the army? Old Wong asked. The young man wasn't prepared for such a sudden question. He didn't answer for a while. After calculating in his heart for a while, he said, 5, 6 years. Yes. Old Wong sighed and measured in front of his chest. You were only this tall when I picked you up. The young man laughed foolishly. Not bad. You've been in the army for so many years. You've only grown a little. Nothing else. Old Wong suddenly scolded. You only know how to peel potatoes in the army. You don't know anything else. You won't even know how you died in the future. The young man lowered his head and smiled. He didn't care. Old Wong had a sharp tongue. He knew about it all these years. Old Wong saw that the young man didn't say anything. He snorted and said, My friend spread the news. Last night, Lord Sword Saint, War King, Pope, and King of Fighters ambushed the Red Disaster. They wanted to behead it. Oh! The young man finally stopped what he was doing and raised his head. His eyes lit up. The young men of the Middle Empire all had this reaction when they heard the words Sword Saint. It is said that in the end, only the Sword Saint walked out. Geezer Wong let out a heavy sigh and knocked the pipe against the soles of his shoes. The old man was melancholy. The human race was worried. They had lost 3 legends at once. The fall of War King was something the human race couldn't bear. Putting aside the title of the human race's strongest, he was the king of Nanshin. In this way, the people of a Nanshin empire would be in chaos. The young man was also stunned. He sighed in his heart. Aya, even a legend is dead. Then he lowered his head and continued peeling potatoes. To the young man, the fall of a legend or the death of War King wasn't as important as the potatoes in front of him. After all, wasn't Lord Sword Saint fine? People were too far away. What did his death have to do with him? He had to do the work in front of him. If he didn't finish it, he would starve. Chapter 363. Geezer Wong looked at the youth's indifferent expression, and anger rose in his heart. No matter what, Zhan Wong and the others were comrades in the army. Now that you're in trouble, Even if you're not sad, you have to pretend. Geezer Wong stood up and limped towards the youth. It turned out that he was actually a cripple. The youth saw Geezer Wong walking towards him with difficulty, but he didn't care. He just continued with his work until his head was hit hard by the pipe. Ah! The youth covered the back of his head and looked at Geezer Wong in confusion. What are you doing? Stop peeling. Geezer Wong glared at the youth. Go out for a stroll. The youth was baffled. Then who peels this potato? The old man became even angrier. He snatched the peeling knife from the youth's hand. The big army cooks. I need you to peel potatoes? Get lost. The youth stood up helplessly, covered his head, and slowly walked out. Go out for a stroll. But where to go? The youth suddenly felt that the palm on his head was wet. He took it down and saw that it was bright red. F***CK. He was bleeding. Geezer Wong's hand was too vicious. Well, now there was a place to go. The youth sighed and walked towards the wounded barracks. When he arrived at the wounded barracks, the youth was shocked by the scene in front of him. There were groans and screams everywhere. Wounded soldiers were everywhere. The air was filled with the smell of blood and herbs. Countless doctors and Church of Light monks were so busy that their feet didn't touch the ground. They were all sweating profusely. But even so, the number of dead people being carried out never stopped. Ever since the mobile city entered the battlefield, the war between the human race and the beast race was no longer the main battlefield. It could only be considered a local conflict. But this local conflict still caused the human race to suffer heavy losses. Huff, huff, finally, a doctor stopped beside the youth. He was panting like a cow. Looking at the blood on the youth's forehead, he asked anxiously, What happened to you? Let me take a look at you. The youth looked around at the groaning, bleeding, and missing arms and legs. He took a step back guiltily. No need, no need. It's just a small injury. It's not worth mentioning. Then what are you doing here? The doctor rolled his eyes at the youth and turned to leave. The youth lowered his head in shame. He didn't want to look at the wounded soldiers. The hellish scene around him made him feel cold from the inside out. It was like ice was growing out of his bones. Look at the sky. Bang, bang, bang. All of a sudden, cries of surprise rang out from the surroundings, followed by the rapid sound of a golden gong, waking the young man up. This was the alarm signal. The youth looked towards the sky. The young man's voice was stuck in his throat. It was as if he had lost the ability to speak at this moment. In the far west, there was a huge volcano. That was the enemy's main camp. Standing at the youth's position, he could only vaguely see the shape of the mountain, but could not see it clearly. But for some reason, the creatures circling above the volcano could be seen clearly. Thick and solid legs, a long tail, a red body, and a pair of powerful wings. Red. The young man knew that it was him with a single glance, and he believed that countless humans were the same. The young man's body stiffened, unable to move. Is this the human's enemy? Is this the enemy of a legend? Roar! The red disaster suddenly roared. The loud sound seemed to resound through the entire world, causing people's eardrums to hurt. The youth couldn't help but cover his ears. Then he saw the red disaster spit out a huge pillar of fire into the sky, dyeing half the sky red. The great fear crushed the youth's last shred of rationality. The youth took 2 steps back and fell to the ground. The power to destroy the heavens and the earth. How could the humans win against such an enemy? Not good. I'll die. The youth only had these 2 thoughts in his mind, but he didn't even have the courage to run. The red disaster flew towards the humans. It wasn't hard to imagine what it wanted to do. If that beam of fire that lit up the sky had been shot down towards the human camp, that would be the worst disaster in the history of the human race. The red disaster easily flew past the mobile city. Although the mobile city was powerful, it couldn't stop the red disaster if it didn't want to fight it. The red disaster flew above the human camp. It was going to spit fire. It's over. No one can stop it. The youth looked at the red disaster's figure, and his heart was filled with despair. The huge pillar of fire was already pouring down on the humans. A disaster was about to happen, and it was irreversible. Clang! Just as everyone fell into despair, the clear sound of a sword suddenly resounded through the world. This sword sound was so ear-piercing that everyone's thoughts of despair couldn't help but stop. A monstrous holy light suddenly lit up. The flames that the red disaster spat out instantly dissipated. It was like a thin layer of snow that shouldn't exist on a summer day. A golden-haired figure wearing white armor stood in front of the red disaster. Her sword was pointed at the red disaster, and she didn't retreat a single step. The youth's eyes suddenly lit up. It was as if he saw a peerless hero unsheathe her sword. She swung her sword at the despair that was as deep as the night. A long hole was cut in the night, and a dazzling light shone down from it. The youth seemed to recognize that hero. That was the legendary Holy Maiden of Light. He had seen her a few times when she was treating His Majesty the Golden King. The Holy Maiden of Light was too easy to recognize. At such a distance, the youth was sure that it was her just by looking at her back. Red Disaster, you've killed countless humans. Today is the day you die. The Holy Maiden of Light's voice was pleasant and dignified. It was like an oracle that clearly reached everyone's ears. Was this a true hero? Even against the Red Disaster, she wasn't at a disadvantage at all. Oh, I was wondering who it was. Isn't this the princess of the Simai Empire? You were caught by me back then. I was careless and let you escape. What? Are you here to die today? Hearing the Red Disaster say this, the youth recalled that the Holy Maiden of Light had been caught by the Red Disaster before. It was all thanks to the heavens, but in that case, the Holy Maiden couldn't defeat the Red Disaster. Was she going to sacrifice herself for the humans? The youth was instantly anxious. Oomph. Red Disaster, I'm no longer the same as before. Look at what this is. The Holy Maiden of Light seemed to have a plan in mind. She held the sword in her hand forward as if she wanted the Red Disaster to see it more clearly. Hearing the Holy Maiden of Light's confidence, the youth felt much more at ease. This is the legendary Holy Sword. In the youth's eyes, the Red Disaster suddenly panicked. It was no longer as majestic as before. It seemed to be filled with fear of the Holy Sword. The youth heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that the humans could be saved. Throughout the history of the human race, there had never been such a powerful sword. Just holding it in one's hand would cause thousands of streaks of light to appear. Was this the legendary Holy Sword that could slay evil dragons? Amazing. That's right. This is the Holy Sword that the God of Light personally bestowed upon you. In front of this sword, all your attacks are futile. When this sword pierces your body, you will completely dissipate. Oh, the youth was very excited, as expected of a sword that specialized in slaying evil dragons. Oomph. Come and try it. The Red Disaster suddenly roared and spat out scorching flames at the saintess with frightening might. However, the Holy Maiden merely held the Holy Sword in front of her and caused the flames to disappear. I told you it's useless. The moment I appeared in front of you with this sword, your fate was already sealed. The youth felt his blood boil and couldn't help but cheer loudly. He wasn't the only one. Countless others felt the same way. The cheers of the humans gathered together and soared into the sky like a tidal wave. The dawn of the human race was right in front of them. She would illuminate the world. Then try this. The Red Disaster raised its right fist and swung it at the Holy Maiden. It still wanted to struggle to its death. The Holy Maiden didn't move at all. She continued to use the small Holy Sword to block the Red Disaster's mountainous fist. A miraculous scene occurred. The seemingly limitless dragon fist suddenly lost all its power the moment it collided with the Holy Sword. It couldn't sink any further. The limitless power disappeared like a clay ox sinking into the sea. Damn it! A look of fear appeared in the Red Disaster's eyes. Immediately after, it began to flee. It flew into the sky. A pair of wings of light appeared behind the Holy Maiden's back as she chased after it. The Red Disaster resisted with all its might in the sky. It used many killer moves, but they were all easily neutralized by the Holy Maiden. Finally, the Holy Maiden stabbed her Holy Sword into the Red Disaster's chest amidst a despairing dragon roar. The Holy Maiden stepped on the Red Disaster's broken body and descended from the sky. With a loud boom, the ground shook. The holy maiden stood on top of the megalosaurus corpse with her holy sword in hand. She appeared holy and dignified like a god. The holy maiden's gaze swept across the countless humans. Everyone looked at her in awe. Nobody said anything. Everything was silent. Then, just as the holy maiden of light had said, the red disaster's corpse slowly turned into red light spots and dissipated. When the red disaster's body completely disappeared, the holy sword fell to the ground with a clang. This seemed to be the first sound the red disaster made after its death. The holy maiden bent down and picked up the holy sword. She looked at everyone and raised her hand. She raised the holy sword high above her head. She shouted, "We won! We won! We won! We won! We won!" Everyone began to cheer. They hugged and high-fived each other. The youth stood at the back of the crowd. He looked at the holy maiden's radiant figure with tears in his eyes. The holy maiden held her holy sword and led countless human warriors. After going through trials and tribulations and narrowly escaping death, she finally slew the fire dragon king, the red disaster, on its throne. Holy Calendar. Chapter 364. Red Dragon Palace Jilin lay on the golden mountain that he was so proud of and looked ahead with a smile. In front of him was a huge mirror made of rippling water, surrounded by raging flames. Mirror of Fire. It could show everything within Jilin's range of perception in this mirror. This was a useless skill for Jilin, so he had never used it before. Since he had already perceived it, there was no need to show it in front of him. But this time was different. After all, this was his first performance in his dragon life. It was worth watching repeatedly. The images on the mirror kept flashing. It was the scene of the Holy Maiden of Light killing the Red Disaster. What a great show! It was for all the people in the world to see. Jilin watched it over and over again, watching his vivid performance. From time to time, he would let out a hee-hee-hee laugh, which made Bane's back feel cold. Seeing the humans being happy and sad because of his performance, Jilin easily gained a great sense of satisfaction. "Look, how's my acting?" Jilin finally couldn't hold it in and began to show off to the people around him. Bane and Sing looked at each other and didn't say anything. Maybe not. They didn't have the guts. Maybe not. After all, they still had a conscience. Jilin saw that no one was paying attention to him and directly called out, "Bane, tell me. This, that." Cold sweat dripped down Bane's forehead. "Do you still need to say this?" It was flawless and brilliant. Bane quickly threw his conscience aside. Sing suddenly turned to look at Bane and blinked his eyes that were bigger than copper bells. He thought to himself that humans were indeed the overlords of the continent. There were some things that the orcs couldn't compare to. Jilin nodded in satisfaction. He thought so too. Bane let out a long sigh of relief. He thought to himself that Jilin was still so innocent in certain aspects. But we might not be able to fool someone like Sir Sword Saint. Bane thought about it and said, Crimson Lin's acting skills really couldn't be described as good. His biggest flaw was that he was too exaggerated. Normal people wouldn't be so bad. After all, they would never have dreamed that Red Calamity would actually lie to them. But humans like Sword Saint, who had interacted with Jilin before, would definitely be able to tell at a glance. Jilin's eyes were full of pride. It's okay. It's enough to fool most people. Humans will only believe what they want to believe, no matter what the truth. Bane was stunned. He wondered why this guy would suddenly say something so philosophical. All right. Jilin put away the fire mirror and said, Staya won't be back anytime soon. You traitor, go back to your room and stay there. Ben shuddered and turned around to run. This guy, after holding it in for so long, he finally can't hold it in anymore. I'm the only one in a few hundred miles. Thinking of this, Bane ran even faster. Beast King, why are you doing this? Seeing that Bane had run far away, Sing sighed and said to Jilin, Why are you doing this to yourself? Huh? Do you think I care about what ants think of me? Jilin said. Even so, it's... Jilin interrupted Sing. Let me ask you, do you know how many humans there are? Sing did not know. No one knew. Humans? Staya is right. There's no end to killing humans. Jilin was silent for a while, then said as if he had given up. This might be the first time he admitted that there were things in this world that he could not do. This The orcs are willing to give it a try to solve the Beast King's problem. Sing said in a low voice. Jilin closed his eyes and shook his head. You haven't been to the human capital. The density of the humans there is beyond your imagination. Also, humans have their uses. If we really kill all of them, it might be a loss to the orcs. What loss? Races other than humans don't know how to produce. Humans already have a complete currency system, but most of you are still bartering. Jilin knocked his head, feeling a headache. Sing did not understand what the Beast King meant. What productivity, what currency, but it's okay. From now on, the orcs, dwarves, sea clans, and all living things in the world will be on equal footing with humans. Jilin's eyes suddenly became cunning. Is the Nanshin Empire ready? Sing suddenly looked up, his eyes filled with excitement. We're just waiting for your order. Now that the War King, King of Fighters, Muzin is dead, the people of the Nanshin Empire will be in chaos. Using this opportunity, the orcs will definitely take over the Nanshin Empire. Jilin nodded. Has the equipment that was sent to the wasteland been distributed? It's already been equipped. Good. While there are still many people from the Nanshin Empire here, let's hurry up and make our move. Jilin smiled evilly. In human terms, this is called taking advantage of the situation. The Beast King is wise. Sing said sincerely. From now on, 4 of the 5 great human empires will fall into our hands. The Divine Dragon Empire will belong to the Red Dragon sect. The Nanshin Empire will be taken over by the orcs. The 3rd Prince of the Middle Empire will not be a problem. As for the Saimai Empire, they will worship Staya as a god from now on. But the reason was actually a lie that she made with me. Haha, Staya never lies. Who knew that her first lie would deceive the world? Haha. Now, the only human empire that is not affected by me is the Snow Wind Empire. It's not a big deal that a lone tree can't support itself. The world has finally become a little more comfortable. Jilin let out a long sigh, as if he had finally completed a great wish that he had had for many years. When he saw that many races were being bullied by humans, he was angry and wanted to take half of the world for the other races. Now it was about time. Go. The Nanshin Empire must be taken down, and quickly. Only then can our territories be connected, understand? Jilin said. Yes, Beast King. Sing shouted and left. He wanted to take away all the orcs in the volcano. Although the orcs here were only a small portion compared to the orcs in the wasteland, they were all orc elites. They would be the backbone of the future battlefield. Sing's eyes flashed with excitement. That was his yearning and expectation for the great era that was about to come. A great empire was about to be born. The empire's territory included the Endless Sea, the Red Dragon Empire, the Nanshin Empire, the Wasteland, and the Gerda Volcano Range. The size of the territory was unprecedented. In this empire, all living things were equal and accepted all races in the world, including humans. All races could live a stable life here. They could eat well and wear warm clothes. They could work together and coexist in harmony. They didn't have to worry about new lives starving or freezing to death. Humans didn't have to fear the orcs, and the orcs wouldn't bare their fangs at humans. It was like a kingdom in a dream. The Beast King said that when the empire was established, it would be called All Spirits, the Empire of All Spirits. Chapter 365. Jilin counted with his fingers and suddenly realized that he didn't have much work to do. The various races of the world had already stood up, and humans could no longer stand on the heads of other races. Jilin was infuriated when he saw that look of his, as if the heavens were the boss, and he was number 2. They were clearly a group of ants. How could they be so arrogant? And now that he was considered dead in the eyes of humans, the conflict between him and humans would naturally disappear, saving him a lot of trouble. The dragon bone of the Water Dragon King was in his hands, so he should send it back to the Dragon Tomb as soon as possible. However, there was no use in being anxious about this matter. He couldn't leave this world yet. Then, the only thing left was Aisha. The clue of the human dragon's son was in her hands. But the woman mentioned by the Water Dragon King, to be honest, he had no clue. Even if he caught her now, it would be useless. Lin had used his golden pupils to observe her over and over again, and he had almost seen through her. If there was any secret in her body, it should have been discovered by him long ago. Lin suddenly raised his head. The golden light in his eyes shone brightly. He looked to the east. At the same time, the Elf Queen stood on the shore of the Elf Island. The waves were calm, but there was a storm in her eyes. I was schemed against. The Elf Queen's narrow eyes flashed with anger. Somewhere in the Snow Wind Empire, there was a black intermediate town standing in the snow. A town like this was common in the Snow Wind Empire, and there were many of them. Perhaps even the Iron Blood King didn't know how many there were. A black light appeared in the sky above the city, followed by black clouds rolling like waves. Try to hide in the snow. No one can see you. Near the center of the city, there was an inn. Aisha was standing in one of the rooms. The layout of the room was very simple. There was a narrow window and a bed with a curtain. In the middle of the room, there was a table and 2 chairs. There was a cabinet by the wall. On the table, the dark scripture was spread out flat. It was opened, revealing the last page. That was Aisha's pursuit from the beginning to the end. This world was not big for beings like the Elf Queen and Lin. Just like how a village with a few hundred households was only so big to humans. Although it was not to say that he could immediately detect the slightest movement of the grass in the wind. But if something big happened, no one would be able to hide it. From Lin's point of view, there were only 2.5 residents in this village called the world. He and the Fairy Queen. The third prince, after becoming the human emperor, could barely be considered half a human emperor. But now, it seemed like someone was going to pay him a visit. Furthermore, that person's aura was not good. It was cold, dark, and evil. He seemed to be far stronger than himself. However, such a powerful being shouldn't be able to enter this place. Lin narrowed his eyes and decided to take a look. This was because he sensed a familiar feeling from that distant aura. It seemed that Bane and Stia's plan was useless. Lin transformed into his human form and arrived behind Bane in just a few steps. Before Bane could turn around, he felt as if he was riding on clouds. When his eyes could see clearly again, he suddenly appeared in the sky. The thick clouds under his feet made it impossible for him to see the ground. What is this? Bane's voice trembled, thinking that Lin was going to throw him down. Was this how the dragons punish traitors? Bane blinked. He realized that something must have happened. This was not how the dragons killed traitors, because all dragons had wings. It was meaningless to throw them down from the sky. And if Lin wanted to kill him, why would he need to do it himself? Aisha is out. Let's go. Lin said as he stretched out his wings and flew quickly in the direction he sensed. There was a gap in this world. There was another high-speed movement where he could not see the surrounding scenery clearly. The strong wind pressure made Ben swallow all the words he wanted to say back into his stomach. The Fairy Queen turned her head and looked in the direction of Lin, her eyes flashing with a complicated look. It seemed that even though they were separated by countless distances, she could still see Lin's figure clearly. In fact, she could not see, she could only roughly sense Lin's position. In her eyes, Lin was equally striking in this world. It was like the only huge bonfire burning in the dark mountain village at night. Damn it, the Fairy Queen said softly. Along with her voice, there were 2 sudden claps of thunder in the sky. On the Fairy Island, the Fairy Queen's words were law. Not long after, Lin threw Bane on the ground. A bone-piercing chill suddenly came from below and went straight to the top of his head. Bane shivered and quickly jumped up from the ground. He hugged his chest with both hands and rubbed his arms, trying his best to shrink himself into a ball. But even so, Bane still did not feel a trace of warmth. He looked around. The snow under his feet was up to his calves, and the skin on his legs hurt like needles. The wind and snow were fierce, and his clothes were thin. Bane was a little dazed until a hand was placed on his back, and warmth spread all over his body. Phew! Bane let out a long sigh. If Lin did not help, he might have fainted from the cold. Why don't you turn into a dragon when you fly? Bane's first question was actually this. It won't be easy to be discovered, Lin said. Do you care? Bane was puzzled. Now that I've been killed by Stia, I can't expose her, Jilin said. What are you doing here? Bane finally asked a question that a normal person would ask. Aisha is here. Jilin signaled Bane to look forward. Bane followed Jilin's line of sight and suddenly froze. An ordinary city appeared in front of him. There was nothing to see, but a black barrier visible to the naked eye covered the sky above the city. It was as if someone had used a black glass bowl to cover the entire city. What is Aisha doing? Bane asked hurriedly. Being trapped in such a thing by Aisha, one could imagine the situation of the person inside. It would not be good. You'll know later, Jilin said. You're right. Let's ask her face to face. Bane nodded fiercely and rushed towards the city. Now that Jilin was behind him, he had nothing to fear. The wind and snow in the sky were the same, and so was Aisha. Bang! Bane crashed into the barrier and fell backward into the snow. Jilin facepalmed. What a foolish human. Why do you think you can go through? Jilin looked at Bane, who was lying in the snow, and asked curiously. Ouch! Bane groaned in pain. He felt dizzy and could not speak. Jilin shook his head, walked to the barrier, and threw a punch. With a bang, the wind and snow disappeared for a moment, but the barrier was still intact. Bane finally got up, thinking that Jilin could not break it with one punch. Jilin was also confused. He looked at his fist and took out the dragon scale sword. The barrier suddenly rippled, and a line of words appeared. The first sentence of the Bible of Darkness is, Bane was stunned. What kind of method was this? Chapter 366. Jilin smiled slightly. Wasn't this the legendary fill in the blank question? All things are born in darkness and will end in darkness. Jilin wrote this sentence in the blank space with his index finger. The barrier rippled, and a gap that was only big enough for one person to pass through suddenly opened. Jilin snorted proudly and walked in with his head held high. Bane nodded and thought to himself, You are awesome. He lowered his head and was about to follow Jilin in. Bang! Jilin couldn't help but look back. Bane was once again lying upright in the snow. Bane struggled to stand up and held the barrier. He copied Jilin and wrote that sentence on the barrier. There was no movement. What's going on? Bane's eyes were blank. Well, Jilin thought for a moment. You should wait here for a while. Bane was dumbfounded. Why did you bring me here if you didn't bring me in? You want me to stand alone in the cold wind and admire the snow? Jilin ignored him and simply walked into the depths of the town. He could feel that Aisha was there. Bringing Bane here was not a useless move. At least he was a human. After experiencing so many things, Jilin realized that there were many things in this world that he couldn't see clearly from the perspective of a dragon. He needed a human. But since Aisha had set up such a formation, it meant that she didn't want others to disturb her. Aisha's attitude was unclear, and the situation was unpredictable. And the place where Aisha was always very deep. If a guy like Bane rashly tried to probe, he might drown before he could even make a splash. So it was better to test it himself first. Jilin walked forward in the town as if he was in his own yard. Occasionally, there would be 2 or 3 people lying on the side of the road. They were wearing heavy clothes, but their bodies were as cold as ice. Obviously, they had all frozen to death. However, their expressions were peaceful, as if death had suddenly arrived, and they hadn't been able to detect it. Jilin suddenly thought of a legend he had heard before. It was said that in the cold world, humans would often drink too much and walk on the streets drunk. Either they slipped, or they just wanted to sit on the ground to rest, and then they melted into the snow forever, never to stand up again. Well, Jilin admitted that this statement was a bit unreasonable. It was impossible for these people to have held a large cocktail party and then freeze to death on the way home. He didn't want to think that these people's deaths had anything to do with Aisha. He didn't care about these people's lives, but in Jilin's eyes, this way of dying was too miserable. He didn't even know who killed him or how he died. No living being could grasp or recognize their own birth, so they had to at least recognize their own death. There had to be a head or a tail. Creak, creak. Jilin stepped on the snow, leaving a footprint in his footsteps as he walked to the entrance of a hotel. Jilin raised his hand and pushed the door open. Creak, the door was unlocked. Jilin entered the hotel and saw the scene in front of him. Even he was stunned. Then he sighed softly. There was a counter in the lobby of the hotel, and there were 5 or 6 long tables in the hall. 4 of the tables had people lying on their stomachs, probably merchants or adventurers. Half-eaten food was on the table. There were also 2 young girls in messenger clothes lying on the ground. Tisk, Jilin couldn't help but click his tongue. Fortunately, it was cold outside. In addition, the fire in the room had already been extinguished, so these corpses didn't rot and stink. Jilin glanced at them and didn't look anymore. He walked to a staircase and walked up to the door of the innermost room. Jilin stopped. Jilin thought for a moment. Knock, knock, knock. The door is unlocked. Please come in. A woman's voice came from the door. Jilin opened the door and saw the woman in a black robe who seemed to be wrapped in countless secrets. Long time no see, Jilin said. Huh, Aisha sneered. I haven't been by your side for more than a year. How did you become so human? Oh, Jilin raised his eyebrows. You knocked before entering. Do you really think you're a human visiting relatives and friends? But you still answered, didn't you? I was cooperating with you. And for you and me, is more than a year considered a long time? Jilin thought about it seriously and felt that Aisha's words made some sense. Why are you in a room full of dead people? Don't you feel awkward? I didn't expect you to care about this. Aisha was a little surprised. She hadn't seen Jilin for more than a year, but she didn't seem to recognize this dragon. Jilin was also stunned. Only then did he realize that since the dwarves came to the Red Dragon Palace, he had indeed been more particular than before. Sit. Aisha pointed to the stool opposite her table. Jilin nodded, closed the door, and walked to sit opposite Aisha. Why did you build a barrier to cover the city? Naturally, I didn't want to be disturbed. Why did you let me in? Because I couldn't stop you. Bane is still outside. Then let him stay outside. So, Jilin paused. Everyone in this city is dead. You care? Aisha's eyes narrowed. Her eyes seemed to say, why are you, a dragon who has killed countless people, pretending to be compassionate? Have you become a vegetarian? I don't care. Jilin said, I'm just curious. You sealed off the city so that no one can enter or leave, and then you killed everyone in the city. I want to know your purpose in doing this, or rather, what are you doing? Aisha was silent for a long time. Hesitation rarely appeared on her face. This. Aisha finally pointed to the dark scripture on the table and said, although Jilin was still inexperienced in her eyes, Aisha knew that dragons, with their high intelligence, were not so easily deceived. What is this? Jilin asked. This has always been my purpose. A ritual, a magic, an omnipotent knowledge, the ultimate. Witches have many names for it. But in the end, this is just a mission, a summoning ritual. Mission? The god of darkness's personal mission is to use this summoning ritual to summon a shadow of him in this world. All witches take this as their life's work. Why? Because the god of darkness will fulfill the summoner's wish. Oh, cliché. This time it was Jilin's turn to be disdainful. Because the god of darkness is an ancient existence. Aisha did not care. So, have you thought about this wish? Jilin looked directly at Aisha. He also wanted to know what this woman was trying to achieve. Naturally. What is it? Take a guess. Destroy the Temple of Light. I'm more than 200 years old. The grudges of the world have long been indifferent. I think you're a vengeful person. Rule the world? Isn't that too vulgar? Restore the glory of the witches. What does that have to do with me? I'm not guessing. It's immortality. Chapter 367. Eternal life. Even Jilin couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he heard those words. Are you dreaming? Jilin was stunned for 2 seconds before he blurted out. What? Is it unrealistic? More than that, Jilin said in a deep voice. Aren't you underestimating the meaning of the word eternal life? Human. Aisha pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Although it is indeed a happy thing to find you, the only human among the millions of humans who is doing something right. But I have to say, you're trying to fish for the moon in the water, and you are destined to drown. If Staya heard you use the idiom so well, she would be very happy. Jilin ignored Aisha's interruption. Eternal life should be the ultimate goal of all creatures, and all creatures should work hard for it, even if it is just a small step on the path of eternal life. But some low-level races are too insignificant. They feel hopeless about death, and they think they can never escape, so they give up on the path of eternal life. For example, humans as a life, but they don't pursue the continuation of life, but use all their wisdom in other aspects. This is the wrong path, and will only be despised by the higher-level races. From what you said, it seems like I am the only human who is on the right path. Aisha shrugged. If you are really a human, Jilin said, that is the truth. Then why are you so angry? Aisha was a bit confused. When a master who has practiced for 30 years hears that a kid who has practiced for 3 days wants to challenge him, he will also be angry. Jilin's eyes were cold. Eternal life is the ultimate goal of all creatures. In my bloodline inheritance, I have never heard of any race that can achieve it. The Protoss, dragons, and demons have walked on their own paths for countless eras and spent a lot of effort to achieve what they have today. But on the path of eternal life, there is still no sign of the end. But you, a human, actually want to use a ritual to pry into immortality in less than 300 years. This is looking down on the efforts of us higher races for countless eras. Moreover, even the God of Darkness doesn't dare to say that he is immortal. So how can he make you immortal? Are you saying that I was deceived by God? Aisha asked. It's obvious, Jilin said. When the word immortality is mentioned, it's the purest lie in the world. Just like how Bane told a woman that he would love her until the end of the world. It's a lie that can't be any more fake. Everyone knows it's a lie, but there are still countless women who will be defeated by such lies, Aisha said softly. Jilin sneered. This was one of the things he didn't understand about humans. There were actually people who would believe such lies. People often believe for the sake of believing. They only believe because they want to believe. As for what the truth is, people don't want to think about it, because the truth is often not what they want, Aisha said. But you're not that kind of person, Jilin said. Yes. Aisha smiled. She was a person who could recognize reality. Immortality is naturally impossible, but letting me live for thousands of years is still possible, right? Jilin thought for a moment. The God of Darkness is the highest God King. With his ability, it's not impossible, but the premise is that your contribution is worthy of the life he bestows upon you. Of course it's worthy. Aisha stroked the dark scripture. The mythological era ended, and the gods left this world, but all the gods wanted to leave a backup plan. This is the God of Darkness's backup plan. But the light gods and other races worked together to build a large array that enveloped the entire world, completely isolating this world. My task is to open a hole in this large array and let a trace of the God of Darkness's power in. Using the power of a human to pry open the array of the gods. The price must not be small, Jilin said. Of course it's not small. Ever since I became the Dark Saintess, I've lived with the Dark Scripture for 200 years. In these 200 years, I've only done this one thing. Aisha looked at Jilin. Do you still remember the first time we met? Jilin nodded. Of course, he would not forget. The construction of this ritual requires countless dreamlike materials. I spent 200 years and only collected half of them. That time, I want to find you to collect one of them, the scale of the red dragon. Aisha shook her head. It's a pity that it was also that time that I almost used up all my resources in order to turn you into a human. In my impression, you're not a person who gives up easily, Jilin said. Of course, I didn't give up. It's just that when I saw you, I suddenly changed my mind. Aisha's eyes were sly, like a little fox who had succeeded in her scheme. She could also be an old fox. Instead of me spending so much effort to collect the materials, it's better to let you destroy the array in the world. So you've been using me from the beginning? Although Jilin's tone was surprised, his eyes were extremely calm. There was no surprise at all. It was as if he had expected it. Don't make it sound so bad. Witches and evil dragons are on the same side in human stories. We should be helping each other. In human stories, characters like you and I working together should be called colluding together or colluding together. Tisk, Aisha rolled her eyes. You first asked me to catch Staya to test my strength. You volunteered. Aisha did not want to take the blame. Then the Snow Wind Empire. Jilin said faintly. Those dwarves have been wanting to create divine artifacts for generations. It's just that they don't have such a high-temperature flame. If you go, they won't let you go. You should be interested in divine artifacts, too. Aisha crossed her arms in front of her chest. She was very proud. Bad guys always enjoyed it when they reveal their plans. Their wisdom could finally be discovered by others. Yes, there was finally someone who appreciated their outstanding character. However, the protagonist and the good guys did not think so. They thought that this guy was really bad. If he was not killed quickly, it would be a disaster. Therefore, it was a wise saying that villains died because they talked too much. Then, creating divine artifacts requires a god's soul. That's right. That's a necessary condition. It's also the first step to destroy the array of gods. The first array base is there. It's the work of the gods. Aisha was exhilarated. After that, Staya used God's descent to kill me. It's also related to you. My dark scripture is not completely closed. She can't use God's descent. Aren't you afraid that she'll really die? The dark scripture can be opened at any time. I can enter God's descent at any time. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. After that, you left a piece of paper for me to go to the Elven Island. Isn't the Elven Queen powerful? Very powerful. Jilin snorted. Then I met the Oceanic tribe. As long as you go to the sea, the Oceanic tribe will definitely look for you. You expected that I would destroy the calming formation. Of course, you wouldn't ignore the Oceanic tribe. The second array base was already destroyed. Later, the 4 human kingdoms united. The third prince became the emperor. Was this also because of you? No, it's mainly because of you. Without you, the humans would never be united. I just added fuel to the fire. In order to arm the orcs, I cut open that barrier. When a person gets a god's weapon, he will want to cut something to see if it's fast enough. I guess that you would use that barrier to test your sword. At the same time, 2 array bases were destroyed. The array of gods was already on the verge of collapse. Then, you stole the black-haired princess. The conflict between me and the humans erupted. Her name is Lysana. You didn't even remember her name when you captured her. After that, the 2 sides started fighting. I was shot by the Elven Queen. Jilin covered his left chest as he spoke. The wound that the Elven Queen gave him was still hurting. Aisha was finally a little embarrassed. It was indeed me who asked the third prince to ask the Elven Queen for help. You want to kill me? Jilin's eyes shone with golden light, like golden flames. Absolutely not. Aisha raised 3 fingers and swore. I only wanted to trick the Elven Queen into giving me that arrow. She could only shoot 1 arrow out of the Elven Island in a short period of time. If I hadn't tricked her out, I'm afraid I would have been shot to death when I was building this array. You should have told me beforehand. Jilin finally stood up and stared at Aisha. Do you know how painful the Elven Queen's arrow was? Chapter 368. Okay, calm down. Aisha raised her hands and pushed Jilin away. I can't tell you about this first. Jilin glared at Aisha. After a long time, he slowly said, No human has ever made use of a dragon to such an extent. You took me in a big circle in this world. You achieved your goal, but I got nothing. Jilin looked at Aisha. He didn't know what he was talking about. He just felt uncomfortable. Now Aisha had achieved all her goals. She could reveal her plan in detail without hiding anything in front of him. She was as proud as a winner, showing off in front of him. But he, on the other hand, had only made a wedding dress for someone else. He even took the most terrifying arrow in the world. It was like being used as a tool by someone you trusted. Then, that person said to you proudly, See, I'm smart, right? Would you smile and nod and say yes? No, you would only slap him on the head. If you didn't spit on him, it would be because you cared about your brotherhood. Phew. Jilin sighed. You're so proud. Do you think you're invincible? Now, no one could stop me except you. Aisha looked at Jilin. Do you want to stop me or kill me? Jilin thought about it seriously. The best way to defeat Aisha's arrogance was undoubtedly to stop her. Let her fail when she was about to succeed. Was there any better way to vent his hatred? However, Jilin wouldn't do that. If Aisha was pursuing immortality, then Jilin would support her. As for being used by Aisha, although it was a little embarrassing for Jilin, it wasn't a big problem. He was the only living dragon in this world. At worst, he wouldn't tell anyone in the future. The only thing that couldn't pass was the Elf Queen's arrow. I can't take that arrow for nothing, Jilin said. No problem. Once I'm done here, we'll come up with a plan to go to the Elven Island and avenge you, Aisha said. Get lost. If I want revenge, I'll be looking for you. Jilin didn't want to go to Elf Island. How about this? You're not interested in anything else. How about I return Lisana to you? It's a deal. Jilin nodded heavily. There's one more thing, Aisha suddenly said. What? Jilin was stunned. What's the matter with Leo? Aisha asked. Leo. Jilin thought for a while and realized that he had never heard of this person. Who is he? Pope, Aisha said. I remember you promised me that you wouldn't kill him. Oh, now that Aisha mentioned it, Jilin suddenly remembered that there was such a thing. I didn't recognize him. Aisha didn't believe him. Both the Pope and she had lived for more than 200 years. Their bodies were very different from ordinary people. With Jilin's eyesight, he could tell at a glance. But when Aisha mentioned this, Jilin was immediately interested. You know how to embroider? That magic array embroidery is amazing. Aisha was expressionless. Jilin's mockery didn't affect her. I've lived for more than 200 years. I have to do something. Suddenly, Jilin and Aisha looked up at the sky. It's starting, Aisha said softly. I suddenly recalled a saying from the humans. Jilin suddenly said as he sensed the powerful and dark aura that had suddenly appeared. What? The strongest castles are often destroyed from the inside. That's the truth. It's just that I've never seen any strong castles. That's just a metaphor. At this critical juncture, Aisha and Jilin suddenly started talking nonsense. It wasn't because they wanted to prove to the other party that they were calm and unfazed even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. They were just a little nervous. Yes, even Jilin was a little nervous at this time. The god of darkness was also a top existence in the dragon bloodline. He could stand shoulder to shoulder with any dragon king. And Jilin was still a little dragon born, less than 1,000 years old, outside the Black Barrier. Bane was just waiting for Jilin and Aisha in boredom. Although his clothes were thin to wind and snow, he didn't feel cold at all, until the wind and clouds began to gather in the sky. Bane looked up at the sky. He saw countless clouds began to gather in the sky above the town. The originally ethereal white clouds became thick and dark, giving people a feeling as if they were heavy. Gradually, the thick black clouds began to rotate slowly, forming a huge black tornado in the sky. At this time, even the wind was quiet, the snowflakes were no longer flying, and there were no lightning flashes in the black clouds. But it was precisely this that made people feel even more terrible. The sky suddenly became completely dark. It wasn't that the cloud tornado covered the sun, but that the night suddenly came. No, it wasn't accurate to say that it was night because there were no stars or moon in the sky, only darkness. Bane blinked, cold sweat coming down, because he stretched out his hand, but he couldn't see it. It was so dark that he couldn't see his fingers. Bane had never experienced such absolute darkness. Before today, unable to see his fingers was just an exaggeration of human beings. Even if the night was dark and the wind was strong, even if the moon was dim and the stars were few, even if people couldn't see the road under their feet, they could always see the hand stretched out in front of their eyes. Even if the world was dark, it wouldn't really mean that the light wouldn't be left for human beings. But today, there really wasn't a trace of light. There were also no lights in the distance. Obviously, the Snowwind Empire had a lighthouse-like building to ensure that the citizens wouldn't get lost in the snow. It was as if all the light was swallowed by the darkness. Bane looked around. He didn't want to see anything. He just wanted to prove that his eyes were still fine. Until Bane raised his head and looked up at the sky. He saw a huge shadow flashing by. There was obviously no light, but he could still see it. That shadow was too huge, as if it covered the entire sky in a flash. Bane suddenly felt a little dizzy. He felt as if his consciousness was about to leave him just because he saw that shadow. Bane suddenly fell to the ground in the darkness. A few seconds before his consciousness completely left him, he only had two thoughts. Today, I actually fell on the same ground 3 times. Jilin, no matter what Aisha wants to do, you have to quickly stop her. Jilin didn't want to stop her. He just increased the golden light in his golden pupil to the maximum. The golden dragon pupil was the strongest pupil in the whole universe. Jilin could see that shadow. Sure enough, it was just a shadow. It was pitch black, like a person was draped in a black cloth, covering the whole body. But this cloth was very far away, covering the whole world. God of Darkness. Aisha's expression was solemn. She assumed the posture of a witch priest. Jilin had never seen her do such a thing. Only now did he suddenly realize that the witches were also a religious organization. The time was a lot earlier than I thought. You did a good job, my believer. The ethereal voice resounded throughout the world, but there was no way to find it, because the voice seemed to come from every corner of the darkness. At this time, the world was dark. Chapter 369. The sky was blue, and the scorching sun was high up in the sky. The scorching sun shone on the earth, and the breeze blew gently. All living things grew and flourished. This was just an ordinary day that couldn't be any more ordinary. However, without any warning, the world fell into darkness in an instant. Everyone felt their vision go dark. Creatures who bathed in sunlight from time to time couldn't realize how important sunlight was. But at this moment, after losing the sunlight, it only took a moment for people to realize that it was an inseparable part of them. Panic that could destroy a person's mind gradually spread. How could the sun that could shine for countless years suddenly lose its effect? Didn't the Saint of Light just defeat the Red Disaster? Shouldn't light cover the earth now? But why did darkness suddenly appear? Such pure and absolute darkness, without a trace of starlight or moonlight. This was not night. No one knew what this was. No one knew what had happened. They only knew that the sky had changed. Origin. No matter how powerful the seal is, it can't withstand the destruction of time. Many efforts have been in vain for hundreds of millions of years. The voice of the God of Darkness sounded from the darkness. To the people in the darkness, it was like whispering quietly in their ears, just a bit louder. My beloved daughter, will you change your mind now? Will you control this world with me and change it? The voice of the God of Darkness sounded again. Jilin frowned and looked at Aisha. So you have this kind of relationship with the God of Darkness? Aisha gently shook her head. The God of Darkness wasn't talking to them. The Elven Queen stood on the shore of the Elven Island and looked at the darkness that covered the sky. Her eyes flickered with a complicated light. It was unwillingness and anger. She clenched her fists and answered the God of Darkness silently. In front of her was darkness that could devour everything. Behind her, the Elven Island was still sunny and sunny. So that's how it is, the Supreme God of Darkness said in a low voice. An existence like him seemed to have a trace of disappointment in his voice. I thought I could enter this world because you agreed with my idea. I didn't expect you to violate the God's oath. Gods can't forcibly decide the fate of other creatures. The Elf Queen said softly. Although the God of Darkness was half a world away from her, she did not deliberately raise her voice. She knew that as long as God was willing to listen, no matter how low you whispered, God would hear you. On the other hand, as long as God was not willing to listen, no matter how much you kneeled and kowtowed, or how loudly you shouted, it would be difficult to convey God's message. From the very beginning, God's position was far higher than that of other living beings. Only the highest existences could say something like, all living beings are equal. God can lead all living beings to a better life. Humans should obey God, the God of Darkness said. Regardless of whether it is good or bad, life should follow one's own choice, because that is the true meaning of living. God created life, but didn't want it to live freely. Then why did God create life? The Elven Queen asked. For God, of course. Life is the proof of God's conjecture. It is the staircase on the Tao, the tool to reach a higher level. The god of darkness said calmly, "If the living beings hadn't left this world, the humans of this world would have developed greatly and been able to do much more for God. So many years have been wasted." TSK. Jilin clicked his tongue. Even a dragon who had killed countless people felt that the god of darkness's words were too much. The son of the fire dragon king? The god of darkness seemed to sneer. The dragons are really generous. Jilin didn't know what the god of darkness meant, but it didn't stop him from widening his golden eyes to the maximum and glaring at the god of darkness. Anyway, the relationship between the dragons and God had never been good. The water dragon king and the sea god were purely exceptions. So, God created life just to make himself a tool or a toy to relieve boredom. The elven queen asked, "God doesn't feel bored. Child, you've been in the lower realm for too long." When talking to the elven queen, the god of darkness instantly changed his tone, as if he was an earnest and persuasive elder. "No, God will," the elven queen said firmly. "It's just that you've been lonely for countless years and are used to it." The god of darkness was silent for a few seconds. "If you insist, that's fine. Then what about me? Am I also a tool you created?" The elven queen asked. "No, of course not." The god of darkness's tone was a little anxious. "You're different from them. How can you compare yourself to those creatures? We created you to give birth to a new god. You're the same as us." "No, I'm different from you," the elven queen said. "I will respect all life, even if it's fleeting." The god of darkness sighed faintly. "Child, you're still too young. It's not surprising that you have such thoughts. But when you stand above the god realm and look down on the lower realms for millions of years, you'll witness countless lives die and are reborn in the blink of an eye. The destruction of the world is just a passing cloud. At that time, you'll understand us and become a real god. I won't. This is inevitable. Just like a child will grow up eventually. Even if you don't want to, you can't resist. One day you'll stand by our side. But this time you'll just watch from the side. My apostle, when the time comes to fulfill the contract, I'll give you endless life to live with me." The god of darkness's voice was far and near, then slowly lowered until it disappeared. The darkness in the sky began to move. It didn't dissipate, but began to converge into Aisha's body. All the darkness rushed toward Aisha as if the sky was falling. It was like a black sea was about to pour into a person's body, but it was also like putting a whole black sky into a person's body. Jilin was shocked. He thought that the god race was really something. Such a large amount of energy was poured into a human's body. It was reasonable to say that this person should explode in less than a second. But Aisha was fine. The sky suddenly went from darkness to light. How long had it been in the middle? No one could tell for a while. People only felt that it was a very long time, and a day passed like a year. Speaking of which, humans were really subjective creatures. In their world, even time could be very fast or very slow. When people saw the sun again, they breathed a sigh of relief. It was as if they had escaped a disaster or the end of the world. But what they didn't know was that at this time, in the north of the Snow Wind Empire, where even Jilin had to fly up to the ninth heaven, countless blue-gray life opened their eyes under the thick layer of ice. Ever since Jilin came, he had been pacing back and forth on the ice field, holding a short knife and constantly chipping away at the ice surface. At this moment, he finally straightened his body and put down the short knife in his hand. This job, he didn't need to do it anymore. His current task was to lead the people under the ice to take back the world that should have belonged to them, and to prove to the gods that they were the real people. Kacha! Kacha! Cracks appeared on the ice and began to spread from his feet. He was the beginning of the real people, and also the end of the human race. The era of the real people had come. The real people would judge and betray the gods. The real people would bring this world back to the embrace of the gods. Chapter 370. The melting of ice was always done inadvertently and quietly, without anyone noticing. It wasn't until the first person fell from the ice that people realized that no one could get on the ice anymore. It was the same with the birth of a real human, which was not noticed by any creature at this time. But because of this, The behavior of the god of darkness seemed somewhat unreasonable. In Jilin's eyes, this guy spent a lot of effort to come to this world, but in the end, he didn't do anything. He just gave Aisha some life and chatted with his daughter. A few useless words. Wasn't this idle? But obviously, even if the god of darkness was idle, he wouldn't do such a thing. He must have done something, but no one noticed. Perhaps when he appeared here, his purpose had already been achieved. Jilin thought silently, turned his head and glanced at Aisha, and found that she was similar, looking down and thinking like him. It seemed that she didn't know the purpose of the god of darkness either. Humans are often very stupid when they try to guess the intentions of God. Jilin habitually despised humans for overestimating their abilities. I know. Aisha's face was dignified, and she casually answered without denying it. But I can't help but guess. Do you have any clues? Jilin was silent for a moment. Although he could look down on Aisha from a biological level, he really didn't think that he was much smarter than Aisha. Instead of guessing here, why don't we ask someone? Jilin avoided Aisha's question. Aisha turned her head to look at Jilin. It was self-evident who the person that Jilin was talking about was. But the problem was between the two of them. Who could communicate normally with that person? Aisha, as a witch, was opposed to the elves. Moreover, she had just received a gift from the god of darkness. In the eyes of the elf queen, she was now like a pest, and it was already a good deed to kill her. Killing her didn't need any reason, and it could even be regarded as the elf queen's duty. As for Jilin, he had just been shot by the elven queen 3 days ago. The two of them had been enemies for generations. After being asked by Aisha, Jilin hesitated for a moment. The elven queen was the only living being in this world that could make him feel weak. That woman broke the rules. If it wasn't necessary, Jilin didn't want to deal with that woman. Even if lions and tigers lived on the same grassland, they would not fight easily. It wasn't that they were afraid of each other, but there was no need for them to do so. He could eat his fill by biting a sheep to death, so why should he bite a tiger or a lion? Therefore, when a tiger and a lion lived on the same grassland, the best way to coexist was to not see each other. In the words of the humans, the king did not meet the king. Jilin repeated in his heart. He wanted to explain that he did not want to see the elven queen because he was afraid of her. No, how could the dragon race be afraid? Jilin felt a little ashamed of the cowardice that had quietly risen in his heart. Cough. Jilin coughed. If it's necessary, it's not a big deal for me to see the elven queen. Aisha blinked. What's going on? Even if Aisha could predict things, she couldn't guess the ups and downs in Jilin's heart at this time. It's nothing. She can't kill me anyway. Jilin snorted coldly. It seemed that he was bluffing. Well, Aisha thought for a moment. It's good to ask. The god of darkness had descended. No matter what he did, it must be a major event that could turn the world upside down. It was very necessary to understand it in advance. Only by anticipating the next changes could they decide whether to protect themselves or fish in troubled waters. TSK. Jilin clicked his tongue. Let's go then. Bane is still outside. You take him away. Aisha nodded to show that there was no problem. That woman. Hurry up and give her to me. Jilin said. Aisha nodded again, but this time there was a little more impatience. Jilin turned to go out. At that moment, Jilin was stunned and his body slightly paused. There was not a single corpse in the tavern's hall, disappeared into thin air. To be able to do this under Jilin's nose, Jilin walked out of the tavern. Sure enough, the corpses on the street were all gone, and there was no trace of movement around. Jilin slowly walked out of the town and saw Bane lying in the snow. His body was intact, but the energy in his body was severely depleted. It seemed that he had used 3 or 4 big moves that could only be used once in a short period of time. However, it was fine as long as he wasn't dead. Jilin stretched out 2 pairs of dragon wings on his back and gently flapped. There was a loud bang, and snow filled the sky. A circular space was suddenly cleared under Jilin's feet. He flew in his human form and instantly rushed into the sky, turning into a small that could not be seen by the naked eye, and flew in the direction of the elven island. Aisha looked in the direction where Jilin had left and scratched her head in distress. She thought to herself, How do I tell him that Lysana has already run away? Jilin broke through the air, whistling as he flew across the icy plains. The Red Dragon Empire. Not long after, he arrived at the Elven Island. Jilin stopped at the outer border of the Elven Island. The Elven Queen stood on the shore, looking at Jilin through the barrier of the Elven Island. She had obviously been waiting for a long time. Seeing Jilin's human form with a pair of wings on his back, the Queen was slightly startled. In her impression, dragons were a group of extremely arrogant creatures. They were used to everything about themselves and thought that they were better than other creatures. How could a normal dragon make themselves look like this? Jilin obviously understood what the Queen meant. He touched his human head. There's no other way. In the eyes of humans, I'm already dead. In order to protect this lie, I can only do this. There should be more humanoid creatures with wings on their backs, right? For example, the Condor clan? The Queen's expression turned cold. She had not communicated with this dragon before, so she was a little unsure. Was this dragon provoking her, or was there something wrong with its head? 3 days ago, I shot an arrow at you. It's fine if you didn't die, but I didn't expect you to come again. Trespassing on the Elven Island without permission is a capital offense. Then I can't knock on the door before coming, right? There's no door on your island. Also, as far as I know, there are many humans who trespass on your Elven Island, but I don't see you killing them directly. The Queen was sure that this dragon was crazy. Because she was best friends with the first Saintess of the Light, humans and elves had an ancient covenant. It was not considered trespassing when humans entered the Elven Island. All right, I thought you had something to say to me after meeting the God of Darkness. It turns out that it's all boring stuff. The Queen waved her hand. I'm still suffering from the backlash of the Oath of the Gods. I definitely can't kill you outside the Elven Island. Hurry up and leave, or you can come in. The Queen gestured in the direction of the Elven Island, inviting him in. Jilin looked at this scene and thought of a phrase for no reason. I'm inviting you into my trap. Jilin shook his head. He definitely could not go. Jilin could also see that the Elven Island was the Queen's small world. Once he went in, the Queen could beat him up however she wanted. He could tell that this woman was in a bad mood. I'm here to ask about the God of Darkness's plan. The Queen looked at Jilin with a meaningful look. It's too late to talk about this now. The dust has settled and nothing can be changed. The catastrophe is coming and the world is about to be in chaos. And you are the only dragon who has a chance to stop all this. Why didn't you do anything? Chapter 371. Why didn't you do it? Jilin heard the Elf Queen's words and felt a little confused. Jilin didn't think he had the obligation to stop the Dark God, even if it was the so-called catastrophe. Even if a meteorite fell from the sky, the earth collapsed, and all living beings suffered, Jilin didn't think he should do it. He would only go and see how big a hole the meteorite could make. Then he went away speechless, thinking that it was really big. What's more, it was Aisha's wish. What if he really stopped Aisha's ceremony? What if she fought with him afterwards? The Queen looked at Jilin's confused face and was speechless. She thought that the Dragon Clan's luck had run out. Otherwise, how could the Dragon Clan produce such a thing? I saw you rushing over there. I thought you'd stop him. The Queen said, because whether it is your race or your position, you have reasons to stop the Dark God, but you seem to know nothing about these reasons. Jilin blinked innocently. Sometimes things were so melodramatic. Everyone thought you knew something, but in fact you didn't, and they didn't tell you because they thought you knew. As a result, things went wrong, and then people would blame you afterwards. How many misunderstandings and mistakes were there in the world? Most of them came from humans, and this self-admitted tacit understanding was self-evident. These things should be engraved in the mind of the Dragon Clan. Why don't you know? The Queen tilted her head. Jilin was also a little angry. If I knew, would I come to you? It seems that you really don't know. What did the Dragon Clan send you here for? This time it was the Queen's turn to be puzzled. Jilin was still speechless. Until the former, he thought that all the Dragon Clan had already grown up when they were born according to the bloodline inheritance. He thought that his survival and growth in this world was the tradition of the Dragon Clan. It wasn't until he communicated with the Water Dragon King that he learned that the real tradition of the Dragon Clan was to hide the dragon eggs in the deepest part of the Dragon Island, guarded by the whole Dragon Clan and the Black Dragon King. It was not until the little dragon had grown up for many years that it could leave the dragon nest. There was no precedent like Jilin's case. Jilin had also realized that his bloodline inheritance had most likely been altered by his father, and the changes were very ridiculous. In human terms, he had been tricked by his own father. He had already been King tricked. How could he know what he was here for? However, it was impossible for Jilin to say this to the Elven Queen. It was too embarrassing. The Queen's gaze on Jilin became even colder. It was like a snowstorm that was as cold as a knife, bone-piercing. The Queen suddenly became angry. It was like you were chatting with your neighbor's child, only to realize that the child was an idiot. Now, you had to explain a complicated matter to the idiot. Maybe you have only one thought right now, and that is to end this conversation. The Queen took a deep breath, looked at Jilin, and said in a deep voice, "Under the ice of the northern land, there was once the kingdom of darkness. Even now, the light could not shine upon that place, where the people of Black slept. Now that darkness had returned to the world, his people were about to awaken. They want to reclaim the title of human. Reclaim the name of man." Jilin's heart tightened for some reason. When the gods created humans, they created a total of 6 types of humans to filter them out. They want to know which type was the best. The Queen said slowly, "The race that later obtained the name of man, which is the current human race, was just one of the 6 types of humans. Then what about the other 5? Survival of the fittest." The Queen said, "This victory, maybe it can also be written as the leftovers. So, the humans exterminated the other 5 types of humans?" Jilin bared his teeth, as expected of a despicable and cruel race. "This is the instinct of living creatures," the Queen said. "In the face of nature or the choice of the gods, any living creature will do their best. You can also understand it as unscrupulous. Since they're all extinct, then the people of Black should not be a concern, right? Many years ago, they could not defeat humans. Now, humans are still quite powerful." Jilin suddenly thought of the third prince, the human race's mobile city, the Ming Shui divine weapon. Opponents from tens of thousands of years ago, they might have been evenly matched. But after sleeping under the ice for so many years, even if they could crawl out from under the ice with a long spear and sharp sword, even if they were full of hatred, even if they were determined to kill everyone in sight, even if they were Buddha. But in the face of the human race's achievements of tens of thousands of years of development, they might at most show off their fearless racial integrity. He imagined a group of uncivilized savages, holding rusty weapons for tens of thousands of years, shouting as they charged forward. They pressed forward with indomitable will. However, what was waiting in front was the human race's mobile city. The city was full of bishops from the Church of Light and well-equipped troops. The sky was full of golden spaceships from the Middle Empire, and the main cannons were fully charged. Jilin felt that if the humans wanted to win this battle, they might not need to lose a single person. Moreover, the third prince was not dead. Then what right did the people of Black have to reclaim the title of man? Was it because they slept for too long and had too many dreams? The era of hard work, not being afraid of death, and having faith to achieve things when they were sleeping was gone forever, just like the spring breeze of last year. When they woke up from under the ice, the first thing they realized should be that the times have changed. In the face of Jilin's disapproval, the Queen just sneered, as if mocking his ignorance. Of the 5 races, 4 were indeed eliminated by the humans, but only the people of Black were sealed under the ice by the gods themselves. Jilin was stunned. Why? Because they were too powerful. When the humans were still struggling for food and hunting, the people of Black were already standing at the top of the living creatures. At that time, the humans called them the devil race, and the humans in their eyes were not worth mentioning. They were born at the top. The gods felt that these creatures omitted the process of evolution and violated the law of life. It was very boring, so they eliminated them. But only the god of darkness did not think so. This was the race he created. He was not reconciled, so he left a way out. Jilin was silent for a moment. Since the Queen of the Elves said that they were strong, they should be very strong. Were they difficult to deal with for the humans? But what did this have to do with him? Who was a human in this world? Weren't dragons eaten? He did not like to eat humans. The Queen shook her head helplessly. Once the people of Black steal the name of man, everything in the world will change dramatically. Not just in this world, but in the endless world, because the situation of the gods may change as well. The gods of the Dark Camp may have the upper hand. At that time, it may be the prelude to the chaotic era. Chapter 372. The sea breeze on the endless ocean was gentle and soft. It was clearly not the warm season. Perhaps it was because Jilin and the Queen were looking at each other. Even the sea breeze was suppressed by their aura. The chaos era. Jilin frowned as he pondered over this rather intimidating term. Isn't that good? The dragon race is a creature of chaos, right? Enough. The Queen could not stand this idiot anymore. You only need to know that soon, an invincible army will set off from the north. They will become a blue river and sweep across the world. Invincible. Jilin did not believe it. Even if the humans were no match for them, the army of the Red Forces would not be jealous. Remember, wherever they go, not a single blade of grass will grow. Ice will start to spread under their feet, and the wind and snow will follow them as they move forward. They want to freeze all the creatures in the world. After they conquer the world, the entire world will be frozen, be it the oceans or the volcanoes. A completely frozen world, only a world of ice. As a fire dragon, can you accept that? No one can freeze the Red Dragon Palace, Jilin said firmly. Just like how the Queen was invincible on the Elf Island. Jilin was not afraid of any creature in the Red Dragon Palace either. Mount Gerda was endless, and fire elements filled the world. Jilin, who was in it, seemed to be able to command the world. The leader of the dark creatures was called the Devil King by the humans in the past. The Devil King's strength should not be weaker than yours, the Queen said. Even if you have the entire Mount Gerda, wherever the Devil King goes, it will be an endless ice field. Geographical advantage is not enough. Jilin took out the dragon scale sword. I can't beat him now. The Queen nodded. Since you are so confident, I will not say anything more. When the time comes, I will be happy to see you killed. It will save me the trouble of doing it. Jilin was stunned. It seemed that the Devil King was really powerful. He had taken out the divine weapon, but it was still not convincing in the eyes of the Elf Queen. So you know the Devil King very well? Jilin suddenly said. Not really, the Queen said. Have you fought him before? Yes. Who won? Of course it's me. Jilin was stunned for a moment before he took a deep breath. He felt as if something was stuck in his chest, causing him to only be able to exhale halfway. Suffocating. Even if you're invincible, you don't have to pretend like this. Jilin snorted coldly, turned around, and flew away without even saying goodbye. They weren't on the same side anyway, so there was no need to be polite. Most of the information had been gathered. Most of what the Elven Queen said was extremely mysterious, such as Chaos Era, God Situation, World Freeze, and Demon King. All of this was useless. Jilin only knew that another war was about to break out. As for the Demon King, Jilin didn't really care. Even if he was very powerful, even if he couldn't beat him, from the name, they should be on the same side. The evil dragon and the Demon King were both the enemies of mankind and the villains of the story. When the two of them met, shouldn't they immediately shake hands and form an alliance to discuss how to rule mankind? They were like-minded. Some Demon Kings also had the hobby of capturing princesses, but for what the Elven Queen said, it seemed like they should fight when they met. On what basis? If the Demon King and the evil dragon fought, what would the hero do? Internal strife was something that humans liked to do. We villains didn't do that. It was a waste of effort and a waste of time. After Jilin made up his mind, he felt a lot more relaxed. In fact, even if he didn't know anything, he could sense the seriousness of the situation. Just the fact that the Elven Queen, who hated him so much, was suddenly willing to talk to him and give him so much information was enough. This meant that in the Elven Queen's eyes, compared to the Demon King, Jilin was only a small problem. That wasn't quite right. At least she was choosing the lesser of two evils. In the Elven Queen's eyes, the Demon King was a bigger threat than her. Of course, it was also possible that the Elven Queen wanted to lead Jilin and the Demon King to fight, so that she could have the wolf devouring the tiger. Forget it, I don't care. Although he had received Stai's education that was like chicken soup for soup, Jilin still didn't cultivate the noble character of taking the world as his responsibility. Because the world wasn't his world, and he didn't know many people. Jilin suddenly felt disdainful of his own thoughts. Since when did he, a dragon, have to be so overcautious and think left and right? Jilin got rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind and started flying at full speed. Boom! Sonic booms were set off in the air. Jilin seemed to have distorted space as he flew away in a flash. Half a day later, Jilin appeared in the sky somewhere in the Semite Empire. There was an endless plain with only a few manors that were far away from each other. Could this be where the so-called farm owner lived? It was rare to see such a sparsely populated place in human settlements. Jilin thought to himself. At the same time, Jilin raised his fist and slammed it down. A huge fist-shaped shadow smashed down, and right below the shadow was a manor. The shadow of the fist whistled down with a violent wind. Just as the shadow of the fist was about to land on the manor, a purple barrier quietly appeared. A golden light flashed in Jilin's eyes. Crack! The barrier shattered with a loud sound, and it didn't have the slightest effect of stopping them. The shadow of the fist continued to fall, and the surging wind was like a hurricane. In an instant, the manor was blown away. The solid buildings made of bluestone were now like building blocks, turning into countless pieces and scattering miserably in all directions. The gray stone foundation under the buildings was exposed. Boom! The earth shook and the mountains shook, and smoke and dust rose. When the smoke and dust dissipated, a huge hole appeared in front of Jilin's eyes. It was dark and looked extremely deep. There was indeed a huge hidden space under this manor. However, in Jilin's eyes, this black space was as bright as day. Jilin slowly descended, landing on a huge bluestone slab. It would appear that the foundation from before had been broken down. Jilin circled around the place, and he was able to see the entire underground space with a glance. That was because this space was completely connected. There were no walls in such a large space, only a few pillars to support the weight. It was indeed in line with Aisha's style of removing useless things. After circling around, Jilin had already grasped the situation of this underground space. On the easternmost side, there was a table and chairs. Aisha was sitting on the chair, and she was looking at Jilin with dull eyes. On the easternmost side, there was a bed. Bane was sitting beside the bed, and a white-haired person was lying on the bed. In the middle, there were countless pieces of junk scattered everywhere. Jilin waved his hand in front of him, as though he was a human choking on smoke and dust. Jilin complained, "Why is this place so messy?" Aisha's face suddenly darkened. Chapter 373. A heart-wrenching scream echoed throughout the dark space. Jilin and Bane were both shocked. Jilin scratched his head guiltily. No one had ever seen Aisha so panicked before. Aisha was stunned for a moment before she rushed towards Jilin. She kept circling around the bluestone slabs and howled miserably whenever she saw a broken object. She sounded like a wolf that had lost its cub. It was spine-chilling. My crystal ball. My book of horror, it's broken. Well, Jilin seemed a little uneasy. It's all your fault for leaving things everywhere. How can you say that? Aisha's face darkened. You tore my place apart, and you dare say I'm messy? Bane was also scared. He thought to himself that if he had just passed by, wouldn't he have been turned into a meat patty? Where's she? Jilin had already scouted the surroundings. He knew that she was not here, and that was the reward that Aisha had agreed on in advance. Aisha took a deep breath and suppressed her heartache. She ignored him. How did you find this place? Jilin pursed his lips at Bane. Before handing Bane over to Aisha, he had already done something to Bane. Aisha looked at Jilin's eyes and instantly understood everything. She sneered. You still have a backup plan now? Jilin shrugged. What if you run away again? That's... Jilin looked at the person lying on the bed. The Pope is seriously injured by you. He can't get out of bed for a few days. Was I the one who hit him? Jilin pursed his lips. Aisha was furious. Sometimes this guy had a photographic memory, but sometimes it was as if he had no brain. Jilin noticed that Aisha was changing the topic. He pointed at Aisha and said in a low voice, "Hurry up." Jilin had just said 2 words when he suddenly stopped. He stood there, motionless, pointing at Aisha. It was as if someone had suddenly cast a spell on him. It was more like time had suddenly stopped. Aisha and the others were stunned. What kind of trick was this? A voice suddenly sounded in Jilin's mind. It seemed to come from the depths of his mind, indistinct and untraceable. Ikagudel. Ikagudel. It was a call. That was his dragon true name. The voice that resounded in Jilin's mind was no different from a clap of thunder in his ears. If someone else could speak in his mind, then they could naturally do something else as well. However, Jilin was only shocked for a moment, and then he was completely relieved, because the owner of this voice was none other than his father, whom he had not seen for many years. Fire Dragon King, Huang. Facing this father who had abandoned him in the magma when he was young, Jilin's mood was a little complicated for a while. Father, Jilin said in a low voice, trying to talk to the voice in his mind. Oh, the voice in his mind suddenly became frivolous. I didn't expect that after so long, you were still so young at that time. You could still remember my voice. Well, for us dragons, this is just the blink of an eye. You slept. Jilin thought silently in his heart. It was just that Jilin forgot that his thoughts could now be heard. Child, I was just describing it. Do you understand rhetoric? Jilin's face suddenly became ugly. I know rhetoric better than you. And how come I don't remember dragons having the skill of intracranial communication? Oh, my child, how can you talk to your father like that? Jilin felt his teeth hurt. What kind of tone is that? Did I talk like that back then? So embarrassing. The Fire Dragon King was silent for a long time. All right, let's stop chatting. I can't talk to you for long. Then please explain why you can talk to me. This is a backup plan I left behind many years ago. I planted a restriction in your body, and through the blood connection between you and me, we can talk to each other. Also, child, are you in your rebellious period now? You touched my blood inheritance. Jilin ignored the Fire Dragon King and said calmly. Although the tone was calm, the lethality of this sentence was very high. It seemed to have hit the Fire Dragon King's weak point, and the Fire Dragon King immediately went silent. It was like a casual strike from someone who had reached the pinnacle of the way of the sword. It was simple yet unstoppable. The Fire Dragon King was silent for a long time, as if it was considering its words. After a while, the Fire Dragon King's low voice slowly sounded. Did the Water Dragon King tell you? You guessed it, Jilin said. I thought it was a perfect plan, but this guy, even after death, he still won't stop. Why do you think you can hide such an important thing from me? When a person is born, everyone tells him that red is green. He will naturally believe that red is green. In that world, you are the only dragon, and all your knowledge comes from your blood inheritance. Naturally, you will believe whatever I say. Jilin sneered. There are countless people in this world who know that red is red. They're humans. Dragons don't listen to people, and they don't bother to argue with people. Even if 10,000 people tell you that red is red, you won't care. That's how it should be. The Fire Dragon King's voice had a trace of doubt in the end. It was obvious that Jilin had other ways to obtain knowledge other than his blood inheritance. Now you can tell me. Why did you leave me here? What do you want to do? Jilin asked. No, child, it's not what I want to do, it's what the dragons want. The Fire Dragon King said anxiously. If I wanted to leave you alone in a strange world, I would be beaten to death by your mother. Jilin's expression suddenly became very interesting. His father was a bit interesting. Dragons also have a tradition of being afraid of their wives. I'm not afraid of my wife, the Fire Dragon King said loudly. I really can't beat her. Your mother is the Golden Dragon King, an existence second only to the Black Dragon King. She is slightly stronger than me. That's enough. Hurry up and tell me what the dragons want. Jilin ruthlessly interrupted his father's boring act of trying to save face in front of him. Ahem. The Fire Dragon King coughed pretentiously, as if he thought this would make him look more dignified. IKA, good ale, you've been playing in this world for so long. The dragons have paid a huge price to send you into this world, even sacrificing a Dragon King. Now, it's time for you to contribute to the dragon race. Lead the orcs, the sea race, and the beast race to conquer the world. Jilin suddenly froze. Why did the dragons want to join in the fun? Conquer the world? This didn't sound like something the dragons would do. Shouldn't the dragons sleep, eat people, and steal princesses? Jilin felt that he had already done a good job. Wasn't conquering the world what the Demon King wanted to do? Although they were all great villains. After all, the division of labor was different, and they couldn't steal the job. Chapter 374. Jilin was silent in deep astonishment. He had a lot of things to say in his heart, but he didn't know where to start. He knew that the Dragon Clan, his parents, had put in so much effort to put him here for a reason. But Jilin should be thinking about taking back the bones of the Water Dragon King or destroying the bloodline of the Son of the Dragon to restore the dignity of the Dragon Clan. The bones of the Water Dragon King will definitely be taken back. Huang's voice suddenly sounded. But what is the bloodline of the Son of the Dragon? Damn. Once again, Jilin forgot that his inner thoughts could now be heard. Phew. Jilin took a deep breath and suppressed the strong sense of irritation in his heart. Why do we want to rule the world? This is of no practical use to us. Jilin was right. There were only so many dragon clans. Counting back and forth, there were at most dozens or hundreds of them. They didn't have any desire for fame and fortune. They had to be obsessed with being above others, because they stood at the top of all living beings. The concept of class in the Dragon Clan was not serious. The only one who really stood above everyone was the Black Dragon King. As for the other Dragon Kings, they would give you face and call you Dragon King. If they didn't give you face, they would ignore you. Even if they couldn't beat you, they would ignore you. The number of Dragon Clans was too small. They could live very well with limited rules and an extremely vague system. According to human saying, when the number of people in a tribe was less than 150, they only needed to gossip, and they could coexist harmoniously. The Dragon Clan society didn't need anything. Then, why did the Dragon Clan want to rule the world? Looking for trouble? Why did the Dragon Clan want to rule the world? Good question. Huang said with interest. Then why have you never thought about why the world is ruled by humans? Jilin answered firmly. Because they have many people. Huang obviously didn't expect Jilin to answer so simply. For a moment, he was caught off guard. It seems that you've thought about this question more than once. Of course, humans are so weak, but they can become the overlords of the world. The reason is naturally curious. Well, then why are there so many humans? Because the desire of human males to reproduce far exceeds that of other races, and the survival rate of human cubs is extremely high. The Fire Dragon King suddenly felt that communicating with his son, whom he had not seen for many years, was a difficult thing to grasp. The two of them had different perspectives on things. The reason why there are so many humans is because they occupy most of the resources, because they have the blessings of the gods, and because they are blessed by luck. Father, I'm talking to you about science, and you're talking to me about metaphysics? Child, don't you have many human friends? You have been led astray by them. What metaphysics? Puny humans can't see it clearly, but you and I should know that it's not a mystery. All right, Jilin admitted that he was used to it. Please continue. I don't want to go into detail with you. Remember, lead the beastmen, and sea folk to conquer the world and govern it well. The world you are in is a crucial location in the universe. As long as this world changed, the entire universe would change as well. Otherwise, the various clans wouldn't be fighting over this place. Then what can we gain from this change? The beastmen and other clans will seize the position of the main race of the human race in the universe and seize great luck. What does that have to do with us? They are all part of the dragon race. So what? Jilin didn't understand. There were so many clans belonging to the dragon race that the dragon race couldn't even remember them all. After so many years, many clans belonging to the dragon race had disappeared like candlelight, but the dragon race couldn't even be bothered to look at them. Why did they suddenly care about the life and death of those clans today? Did they have conscience? No, Jilin thought that other than treating their own clans, their own race didn't have such a thing as a conscience. Jilin silently criticized his own race. In the current situation, it could be said that he was pointing at their nose and scolding them. But the Fire Dragon King wasn't angry at all. When the human race loses their dominant position in the universe, the world will be brand new. The world will change, and a new universe will be quietly born. The God race will also become turbulent. The power that should be exercised by the God race will be taken over by the dragon race. When it falls, it will be our chance. We can replace them and become the gods of a new universe. The beast race will become the main race, and the human race will be expelled to the edge of the world. It will be the same for the gods. Tisk, Jilin pursed his lips. Becoming a god or something, isn't that what we've always despised? We've always looked down on the gods, thinking that they're neither alive nor dead, neither happy nor sad, just like monsters. Why are we going to become gods too? Could it be that you've also changed the part about the dragon race's view of the god race and the bloodline inheritance? Actually, the truth is that the dragon race doesn't despise the gods, but rather yearns for them. Huang was silent for a while, somewhat speechless. No, this part is correct. I haven't changed it. Then why? Because we've seen the end of our path. Huang's voice suddenly became distant. It was as if the Fire Dragon King, who had lived for countless years, really saw the end of the path as he spoke. His voice contained the vicissitudes and despair that Jilin had never imagined. It was just that Jilin didn't understand what end of the path. The path of immortality of the dragon race. The Black Dragon King has already foreseen the end of the path of the dragon race. We've gone the wrong way. We have to change our path. But we can't start from the beginning. We can only seize the fruits of other races' paths and follow their path. We have to seize the path of God. Jilin was confused. Our path is to prove our path with strength, I know that. It should be the simplest and purest path, and also the most suitable path for the dragon race. As long as one's strength continues to grow, one can naturally live longer. But what's at the end of this path? It's the destruction of a universe. The stronger the dragon race is, the bigger their bodies are, and the longer they can live. In the end, we'll burst the universe. Not us, but one of us. If a dragon race bursts the universe, the entire universe will be destroyed. All creatures will be buried with them, including our own race. The price of immortality is the death of the entire universe's people. The price is really high. It's always been like this. The Dragon King's dragon bones aren't very big either. If you want to integrate into the formation, you naturally have to become smaller. Is the path of the god race feasible? At least now it seems more feasible than ours. Where are you now? An ordinary blue planet. The humans here call it Earth. What are you doing there? Nothing. Who's the tyrant king of Western Chu? A human with a bit more strength. What the hell is an antelope jumping over a cliff? An article by a human. Whether it's true or false remains to be verified. Who's the one who chiseled the wall to steal light? It's also a human. In the end, he committed a crime of corruption and was arrested. Grinding an iron rod into a needle is referring to Li Bai, a human, a poet. It's probably fake too. Why did you put these useless things in my bloodline inheritance? I think it's quite useful. How do I return to Dragon Island? Why don't you walk the path of the dragon race first? You said that this world is very important. When we become new gods, it won't be important. Chapter 375. Until the Fire Dragon King's consciousness left and stopped ringing, Jilin and the Fire Dragon King didn't say a word. They were father and son who hadn't seen each other for many years. Jilin didn't know how many years the Fire Dragon King had stayed on that earth. When the dragon race didn't have the responsibility to look after the dragon eggs, they could go wherever they wanted. Of course, there were also the kind of I like to stay at home dragons. Inferring between the lines, the world the Fire Dragon King lived in seemed to be a world dominated by humans, and their civilization had developed to a certain level. But this situation made the Fire Dragon King feel deeply annoyed. Also, the Water Dragon King didn't die here on his own accord, and it wasn't because of friendship with the sea god. That was just an excuse. Everything was arranged by the dragon race. This world was so important that all the races joined forces to isolate it. It was equivalent to building a sturdy wall around a manor, isolating all living creatures outside. But the dragon race used the death of the Water Dragon King to leave a secret door in this wall. It was to send him in. As for how to get out and return to Dragon Island, the Fire Dragon King had already made it very clear that he was strong enough to break this world. But in this way, except for the Elf Queen and the Demon King who was about to be born, all life in this world would die. They would become the tiniest dust and float forever in the endless universe. Not only that, everything in this world would cease to exist. Mount Galta, the endless sea, the desert, the ice field, the Middle Empire, everything would turn into nothingness just because Jilin wanted to return to Dragon Island. Thinking of this, even Jilin couldn't help but feel depressed. What was this? Was the dragon race's destiny to destroy the world? The world would explode as soon as you grew up. This sounded like the self-destruct device of this world. Jilin blinked and finally pulled his thoughts back to the present. What appeared in front of him was a delicate and beautiful face. She was looking at him with a curious gaze. What? Jilin pushed Aisha away. I want to ask you what's wrong. Aisha was furious. You suddenly stood here without moving. If you were an ordinary person, I would think you were cursed. What's wrong with you? Jilin was stunned. Suddenly, he had the idea that it was better not to tell anyone about this. Therefore, Jilin just shook his head and said indifferently, "It's nothing. There's definitely something wrong." Aisha's sharp eyes clearly expressed her thoughts. However, since Jilin had made it clear that he didn't want to talk about it, there was nothing she could do. Not to mention, she wasn't here, so he had to deal with Jilin first. Look at this place. They were all priceless treasures. How are you going to compensate me? Aisha suddenly became angry and roared while pointing at the broken pieces on the ground. It seemed that her first choice was to divert Jilin's attention. How can it be considered a priceless treasure if it can be broken with such little strength? Jilin snorted and ignored Aisha's words. After such a long time, Jilin had some understanding of Aisha. This woman was not only realistic, but also very petty and suspicious. She always felt that someone was coveting her treasures. Well, a person who always thought about how to scheme against others would naturally be careful not to be tricked by others. The truly valuable things would have been carefully preserved in the dark scriptures. What do you know? Aisha was even angrier now. She picked up a piece of wood and held it in front of Jilin. Do you know what this is? Rotten wood. Jilin was stunned and replied casually. This is the Duanmu Manor screen that the king of the Middle Empire gave to me 150 years ago. There were only 20 pieces back then, and now there are only 2 left. There's one in the palace of the Middle Empire and one here with me. It's priceless, worth 10,000 taels of gold. Oh, Jilin's eyes lit up when he heard that it was worth 10,000 taels of gold. Jilin took the piece of wood and turned it over a few times, as if he wanted to see through it. With the help of his powerful golden eyes, Jilin finally confirmed that it was a piece of rotten wood. It was an old piece of rotten wood. Jilin casually tossed the piece of wood to the ground. What was so special about this thing? Even if it was old, there were many trees older than it in the forests of the Red Dragon Empire. Jilin didn't think much of it, but the other 2 naturally couldn't ignore it. Bane's expression suddenly became very playful. He felt that he had finally seen through the layers of fog around Aisha and glimpsed a trace of her truth. 150 years ago, according to Aisha's own age, she should have been around 50 years old. Although she wasn't young anymore, she could still be considered a normal human. For a normal person, it would be a stretch to say that she was still attractive at 50 years old. However, Aisha was still able to make the king of Qin, who was used to seeing women, spend so much money on her Duanmu Manor screen. When he was in the Divine Dragon Empire, He often heard people talking about Dwanmu Manor's wooden wares. Even a palm-sized piece would cause people in the divine dragon empire to fight over it. An item as big as the screen must be very expensive. Even the king of Qin wouldn't be able to buy it just like that. It was true that the sun and the moon could be seen through the fist of his heart. Wait, the king of Qin 150 years ago was that the third prince's great-grandfather? Or great-grandfather? Bane couldn't figure it out. After all, the Middle Empire changed very quickly. However, Bane changed his mind. Wasn't there someone beside him who had also lived for 200 years? He knew. However, when Bane turned around, he immediately swallowed the words he wanted to ask. He saw the Pope's young and handsome face suddenly become very ugly. It seemed like the Pope didn't know when the third prince's great-grandfather had given Aisha a gift back then. Sigh. Bane patted the Pope's shoulder lightly. When he first met the Pope, as a citizen of the Saimai Empire, Bane was very respectful toward him. He even felt like he was looking up at a tall mountain. After a few exchanges, Bane had clearly realized that His Highness the Pope was definitely not an unreachable figure. Not only did he not have the composure of an important person, but he was also so noisy that it made people want to sew his mouth shut. "It's all right, Your Highness. After all, he has been dead for more than 100 years. You and Aisha are a match made in heaven." Oh, the Pope's expression suddenly cleared up, and his eyes sparkled. Although Bane's words weren't special, this was the first time the Pope had heard of such a thing in his 200 years of life. The Pope and the witch are a match made in heaven, or something like that. Tell me more about it. The Pope seemed to want to find something to back this up and increase the credibility of this matter. Bane smiled faintly. It's because she wants to find someone around her age. In the entire world, you are the only one. Someone slightly younger than her is more than 100 years younger. Even if she wants to eat young grass, this grass is too young. Bane and the Pope were suddenly engrossed in their conversation and didn't notice at all. While they were talking, Aisha glanced at them from time to time. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife, like a hidden arrow on the battlefield. However, Aisha really didn't have the time to pay attention to these two fellows. When Jilin threw away the wood, she picked up the half-broken mirror and said that it was a treasure that the Church of Light had lost 100 years ago. When Jilin threw away the half-broken mirror, she picked up the half-broken painting and said that it was personally written by a great master in the divine Dragon Empire. In the end, it seemed that Jilin's entire mountain of gold was needed to compensate for all the things in this room. And Jilin's mountain of gold was more than 30% of the Middle Empire's treasury. Of course, this was impossible. Therefore, Aisha could only be bragging. "Enough. I have something important to talk to you about." Jilin couldn't stand it anymore and said seriously, interrupting Aisha. Aisha was stunned and suddenly didn't know what to do. This was because Jilin was so serious, and also because she really couldn't think of what important this dragon could have in this world. "What do you want to do?" Aisha said blankly. For example, you and I joined forces to conquer the world." There was a moment of dead silence. The three humans quickly exchanged glances. There was no worry about the impending disaster in their eyes, nor was there any sense of urgency before a storm. Instead, there was a trace of doubt and relief. They thought at the same time. This dragon finally remembered what he was supposed to do after so long. Chapter 376. Jilin suddenly made such an earth-shattering proposal, but no one was surprised. Instead, it was more of a feeling of this day has finally arrived or the child is suddenly grown up. Everyone's calm reaction made Jilin stunned. This might be the legendary. If you don't find it strange, the strange will be defeated. Jilin suddenly understood that even people like Aisha and Bane, who had been with him day and night, felt that it was not strange that he wanted to conquer the world. In other words, Jilin was also the world's biggest disaster in their hearts. What kind of people should do what they should do? Bad people should do bad things, and small people should not do big things. Dogs should eat shit, and wolves should eat meat. The Megalosaurus should conquer the world, even if Jilin had never thought of it before today. The deep-rooted habitual thinking was just a stubborn prejudice of humans, but humans had never doubted it. Because this thing was often quite accurate, This prejudice was also a lesson that humans had learned after countless painful lessons. Even if it could not cover all situations, it could be applied to a general range. Jilin felt that he could not refute it, but he needed help. Conquering the world and seizing fate was obviously different from seizing a mountain. You could not become the king of a mountain just by beating all the bad guys in your territory. That also required extremely clever governance methods. Ruling the world, including the entire world in one's own empire, was a great feat that no one in any world had achieved since the beginning of the world. It was naturally the same for governing such a huge country. If the purpose of the Dragon Clan was to let him dominate the world, there should be no problem. He could just call himself the best in the world, and presumably the Elf Queen would not run out of the Elf Island to compete with him. The Demon King who was about to be born would also not fight with him for an empty title. But if he wanted to rule the world, Jilin felt a headache just thinking about it. There were too many people in this world. If he did not use any methods and only used force to suppress them, there would definitely be hidden dangers. Thinking back, that Yulai, who had worked hard for 6 generations, finally became the emperor of the universe. What kind of person was that? What kind of scheming was this? When he sat on his splendid, majestic chariot and inspected his empire like a god, thousands of people were either hiding in their houses or kneeling on the ground. They did not even dare to raise their heads. They did not even dare to look at his chariot directly, fearing that they might offend the heavens. In terms of prestige and honor, who in the world could surpass him? But even he, a true legend, did not expect that when he was dazzling like a god, there would be 2 ant-like characters at his feet. They ignored his brilliance and looked directly at his frame. They each said something softly. Although his voice was soft, it echoed through the ages. One says, "Let the other take his place." One said that a real man should be like this. When Jilin thought of this, he was also worried. It was too difficult. Ahem. Jilin pretended to cough. "You will help me, right?" Jilin's eyes looked directly at Aisha and Bane. The sharp golden light went straight to their hearts. It was as long as the 2 of them dared to say no, Jilin would instantly kill them. Bane swallowed. He wanted to say, I have to think about it. But under the suppression of the golden light, he could not say a word. From the beginning, Jilin did not ask for his opinion. He had never had the right to speak in this group of people. "Of course I can help you." On the other hand, Aisha was surprisingly generous. She said it casually, as if what Jilin wanted her to help him with was not something as important as conquering the world, but something as trivial as borrowing money. "We should be on the same side. But the question is, how are you going to conquer the world? In my memory, you promised Aya and the 3rd prince not to harm the Saimai Empire and the Middle Empire. Are you going to break your promise?" TSK. Jilin looked at Aisha with a complicated expression. "I thought you hated the Saimai Empire. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to mention this. It's nonsense to not care about trifles when doing big things." Aisha waved her hand. "If you want to do such a big thing, you have to think about it thoroughly. If you really don't want to fight with these 2 empires, how are you going to convince them?" "Convince them? Actually, I have an idea about this," Jilin said in a low voice. "I went to the Elven Island before, and the Elven Queen told me that a group of true humans was about to be born under the ice in the north. They also want to conquer the world and kill all humans. I can wait for them to destroy the Middle Empire and the Saimai Empire, and then I can destroy them." Bane was stunned. He thought to himself, how can you be so simple? No, how can you slack on such a great ambition like conquering the world? True humans. The Pope and Aisha cried out in surprise at the same time. "You've heard of them?" Jilin thought to himself. "You've lived for so long and have seen so much." Aisha shook her head slowly, as if she had not recovered from her shock. "I've never heard of the true humans, but I've heard of the legend of a race hidden under the ice in the north. Legend has it that there are countless demon gods sleeping under the ice in the north. Their numbers are as great as the sand in the sea. Their sleeping territory occupies half of the ice in the north, reaching all the way to the sky. They will eventually wake up. When they wake up, the snowstorm in the north will engulf the entire world. When that happens, the entire world will be buried under the ice. Apart from the demon gods, there will be no other living beings in the world. He did not know why Aisha suddenly started telling stories. In any case, Jilin nodded his head as he listened. In his impression, this was one of the few credible legends that humans had. It was basically the same as what the Elven Queen said. The demon gods are about to revive. Is this true? The Pope finally asked. His voice was trembling. Originally, he was unwilling to speak to the enemy of humanity, the Red Disaster. However, compared to the demon gods, the Red Disaster did not seem to be so antagonistic. The Red Disaster killed people because he wanted to. When he did not want to kill, he did not have to kill. It was like a dog catching a mouse. If he was in the mood, he would catch the mouse. If he was not in the mood, he would not look at the mouse. But the demon gods killed. That was their instinct, their nature. They were the natural enemies of humanity, just like a cat catching a mouse. Haven't you heard that a cat catching a mouse depends on its mood? That was its job and mission. In his shock, the Pope expressed his doubts about the Red Disaster. However, Bane and Aisha did not doubt Jilin's words, no matter how unbelievable they were. Jilin naturally did not pay any attention to him. Fortunately, the Pope was still shocked and did not feel awkward. Aisha lowered her head slightly, her eyes falling. In a place where Jilin could not see, her pitch-black eyes that were as deep as the night sky were rapidly moving left and right. They were like two black stars streaking across the sky. The space was deathly silent for a long time. Aisha finally stopped moving her eyes at high speed. She raised her head and looked at Jilin. She stretched out 2 fingers and said slowly, "I believe that there are only 2 possibilities if you want to rule the world. First, you kill all the creatures that refuse to obey you." Bane was shocked. He thought to himself that a woman's heart was indeed the most vicious. How could it be so simple and crude? Jilin nodded in agreement. This was also his first thought. Second, you can play the role of the savior. You can save the world from the demon gods and make all the creatures in the world worship you as a god. Jilin swallowed hard and was speechless for a long time. Aisha's Save the World really made him feel a little disgusted. Chapter 377. Jilin really felt his stomach churning, as if something was trying to rush out of his stomach. Jilin was very surprised because he had not eaten for a long time. Save the world. Jilin was really confused. He had clearly complained not long ago that as a dragon, he was going to rule the world. This was stealing the Demon King's job. But now he was going to steal the hero's job too. Was the dragon race so unreasonable? Why didn't he know? Jilin imagined himself being respectfully called a god and felt that none of the scales on his body were suitable. However, if he ignored the discomfort that this matter brought to Jilin, he had to admit that Aisha's idea was very feasible. But for some reason, Jilin felt that Aisha had other intentions. She had always been like this. Troublesome. A sense of irritation surged in Jilin's heart. What were the dragons thinking? Why didn't they discuss with him before sending him to do such a big thing? Although he was just an egg back then, what if he didn't want to do it? They left a little dragon here for hundreds of years. After so many years, his father suddenly communicated with him telepathically. There was a lot of nonsense, but it was actually just one sentence. "We left you here as a backup plan. Now the time has come. Go and conquer the world." What did they take him for? A pawn? Was this how the dragon race did things? You want to be a god like this? You can go and be a fool. This was too much. There were so many things in front of him, and these things could not be slashed into nothingness with the dragon scale sword. Jilin suddenly felt tired. Is there a magic spell in the Dark Bible that can kill all humans with one move? Jilin looked at Aisha and asked expectantly, "How about half?" "No." Aisha glared at him and answered firmly. Without that kind of magic, even a god would have to reign for a few days in the entire world to destroy humans. Sigh. Jilin looked up at the sky and sighed. There was no other way. He could make it rain in some places, but he could not make it rain in the entire world. Forget it. I'll head back first. Jilin's wings sprouted from his back. It looked like he was about to leave. "Where are you going?" Bane hurriedly asked. if Jilin were to wander around outside at this time? Bane didn't even dare to think about it. Let's go back to the volcano and sleep, Jilin said lazily. What about your plan to conquer the world? Aisha asked. Let's talk about it in a few years. Jilin waved his hand. He was too lazy to think about these things. Bane was a little speechless. He thought to himself, it's good to live for a long time. We'll talk about it tomorrow or in a few days. You, on the other hand, are going to wait a few years? Bane didn't know that when Jilin said in a few years, he might have meant 100 or 200 years later. In any case, the dragon race had a long lifespan. They were not in a hurry. There were so many humans in this world that he knew. Some things naturally had to be taken into consideration. He couldn't attack the Simi Empire and the Middle Empire now, but Jilin could wait. After 100 or 200 years, when Staya or the third prince's grandchildren were all dead, he wouldn't have to worry about these things anymore. Even when he led the beast race to attack the capital of the Middle Empire, the third prince's grandson stood in the palace and jumped out to accuse him of treachery. He could also confidently tell him, "You were deceived by your father. 200 years ago, I didn't make such a promise to your grandfather. Anyway, dead men tell no tales. Moreover, even if he did as Aisha said, wouldn't he still have to let the true human run wild for a few years? If he suppressed the true human race the moment they appeared, and the human race didn't feel any pain, what right did he have to think that he was saved? What right did he have to respect him like a god?" Jilin made up his mind and flew away, leaving the three people here looking at each other, then looking up at the blue sky. Aisha's basement became a huge pit, and this space had never been so bright. The demon god race, is that powerful? The ignorant young man looked at the Pope and Aisha's gloomy expressions and asked carefully. Aisha and the Pope looked at each other and ignored him as if they had a tacit understanding. "We have to inform the human countries about this as soon as possible," the Pope suddenly said. Aisha bit her lips and hesitated. She didn't know if she should spread the news. In terms of personal benefits, there were too many things that could be weighed and were worth discussing. "Aisha," the Pope's voice was unusually stern, and he even slapped the edge of the bed in front of Aisha. But after that, there was nothing. Although he was full of vigor and anger, he didn't know where to start. Thousands of words seemed to be stuck in his chest. The Pope's face was red from holding it in. Bane looked on from his side and sighed. What is love? This is King love. No matter how awesome you are outside, turning your hand over to create clouds and rain with a flip of your hand. No matter how much you despise everything, in the eyes of others, you are frivolous, laughing and cursing, unbridled and unbridled. But once you are in front of that person, you will be terrified, even if you have 120% reason. But when you talk to her, you will carefully choose your words and ponder over it, even if you are extremely sullen. But Your Majesty the Pope, even if you take care of Aisha's emotions, this is not the time. Aisha glanced at the Pope, and the Pope stared back, not giving in at all. After about 3 or 4 seconds, Aisha finally shook her head and sighed. That's good. Since the demon god race has revived, the first to be notified is the Snow Wind Empire. But this place is not suitable for me to go. You go by yourself. Aisha's low and flat tone seemed to contain some anger. Bane instinctively shrunk his neck, turned his head to look at the Pope, and sighed in his heart that His Majesty the Pope was indeed mighty. Good. The Pope suddenly beamed with joy. When the Church of Light destroyed the witches, the Snow Wind Empire had the attitude of a bystander. To some extent, it was the Snow Wind Empire that betrayed the witches, resulting in Aisha being the only one left among the witches. With Aisha's character, it was already beyond the Pope's expectations that she would agree to let the Pope inform the Snow Wind Empire at this time. At this time, one more preparation was one more chance of winning. If there was enough time, the Pope felt that the Snow Wind Empire should be able to drive back the mobile city outside the volcano, back to the place where it should be guarding. The Snow Wind Empire's northern line of defense, to guard the vast ice field. As long as that thing was there, the Pope was confident that no matter who the enemy was, the human race would have the power to fight. Right. The Pope seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and his eyes instantly lit up. Can we have the dwarf race lend us the god-slaying cannon? In the battle with the Red Disaster, the dwarf race's 5 god-slaying cannons suppressed the mobile city to the point that it could not take a single step forward. This scene left a deep impression on everyone. If the human race could use this kind of weapon, it would be like adding wings to a tiger on the battlefield against the demon god race. It's just that, although this kind of ideal was perfect, an ideal was just an ideal and not reality. So much so that Aisha fell silent after listening to it. Bane could not help but facepalm, thinking that this was too whimsical. The dwarf race had moved to the volcano because of the battle with the Snow Wind Empire. If not for Jilin wanting to get a sword to play with on a whim, the dwarf race would have been exterminated. At this time, if you let the dwarf race lend the god-slaying cannon to the Snow Wind Empire, wouldn't the dwarf race be worried that the Snow Wind Empire would turn around and blast the dwarf race the moment they got the god-slaying cannon? It's impossible to let the dwarf race lend the god-slaying cannon, just like how you won't lend the scepter to others. Aisha rarely did not ridicule the Pope's low IQ. In Bane's view, this could be considered as differential treatment, but the Pope was completely unaware. In next instant, he took out a scepter from who knows where and handed it to Aisha, saying casually, "Here, take it and play with it." It was the genuine Pope's scepter. Aisha and Bane were dumbfounded for a moment. Chapter 378. Bane stared blankly at the Pope, wondering if this person was really a fool. That was the Pope's scepter. Holding that thing could control the sacred array. If Aisha really took it, then with Aisha's hostile attitude towards the Church of Light would definitely suffer a heavy blow. At the very least, half of their family business would be gone in an instant. Bane suddenly felt that the Church of Light could survive, until now, was all thanks to the blessing of the God of Light. Aisha gritted her teeth so hard that they made a GG sound. The scepter was something that Aisha could not accept no matter what. Moreover, the Pope personally handed it out, so the Pope naturally knew. By doing so, there was only one effect, and that was to argue with Aisha. Didn't you say that the dwarves could not borrow the god-slaying cannon? Just like how I can't borrow the scepter? Look, I'll lend you the scepter, so what are you saying now? Aisha was too lazy to say anything more to him, so she directly drew a teleportation array and sent the Pope away. Before the Pope left, he still maintained the posture of holding out the scepter. Bane blinked. Where did he go? The Snow Wind Empire. He still has injuries on his body, and he's not wearing any thick clothes. He won't die. Oh, go to the Middle Empire, and the Middle Empire will also take a long time to assemble the Dragon-class golden spaceship. Huh. Amidst Bane's series of screams, Aisha drew another teleportation array and slowly walked in. Aisha's basement was in the southern part of the Saimai Empire. It seemed that she believed in the logic of hidden in the city or darkness under the light. Of course, perhaps she just enjoyed the feeling of superiority of, I'm right in front of you, but you just can't find me in terms of intelligence. But no matter what the reason was, it was not important. What was important was that this position was really not far away for Jilin. Jilin flew straight into the sea of clouds. Along the way, he chased after the light as fast as lightning, and the sun and moon passed each other. With Jilin's wings, the distance of half an empire could only be considered as a stroll outside. But just as Jilin was about to descend from the crater, he was surprised to find that someone was already waiting for him. Aisha was now in the center of the Red Dragon Palace, looking up at him. Aisha was even faster than him. Boom! Jilin landed and looked at Aisha for 2 seconds. Without saying a word, he walked straight to his golden mountain and sat down. He turned back into a dragon. Jilin thought to himself, since you're coming, why don't you give me a ride? Is the revival of the demon gods related to the descent of the god of darkness? Aisha asked. However, there wasn't much of a questioning tone in his voice. When the god of darkness left, Jilin went to the Elven Island and received news of the demon god clan's revival. The timing of these two events was too coincidental. With Aisha's intelligence, she was naturally able to connect the two events in an instant. Jilin was taken aback. You still care about this? Aisha's question shocked Jilin quite a bit. It was as if he was watching a lion eating a rabbit. The lion was eating happily, but suddenly worried about whether or not the rabbit was in pain. Didn't she find it unnecessary and hypocritical? Even if the rabbit was in pain, wouldn't the lion eat it? Even if Aisha knew in advance that the demon god clan would revive, wouldn't she seek those thousands of years of lifespan? She wouldn't. She wouldn't. If it were any other time, Aisha would definitely have retorted to Jilin's provocative question. But this time, after all, it was different. The demon god clan was a symbol of the end of the world, the end of the prophecy. Now that things have come to this, there's no point in thinking too much. Jilin couldn't help but persuade Aisha when he saw how serious she was. What do you plan to make your move? Aisha asked. In a few decades. Jilin thought for a moment and said hesitantly, a few decades? What are you waiting for? If you're waiting for the moment when humans suffer heavy losses, I don't think it will take that long. I'm waiting for Staya to die. In the eyes of the world, Staya has already killed me. She should be the one leading the Church of Light and the Semite Empire now. Because her identity is suitable, and she's a great hero of the human race. Ha ha ha, I can't expose her. Before she dies, I can't reveal my true form in front of others. And according to the Elven Queen, if I use my human form, I definitely won't be able to defeat the Demon King. So I'm waiting for Staya to die before I can fight the Demon King with all my strength. The Elven Queen actually knows about the Demon King's strength? What did she say? Very strong. She thinks I can't defeat the Demon King. What? Aisha gasped. All the previous arrangements were built on the condition that Jilin could defeat the Demon King. If Jilin couldn't defeat the Demon King, then all of his previous plans would be like a building built on quicksand, vanishing in a thin air in an instant. Why are you panicking? Jilin rolled his eyes at Aisha. His giant golden eyes moved, making people think that a giant golden rock was rolling towards him. She said that, but I don't believe it. Just because she said I can't defeat the Demon King. I can't defeat the Demon King? No, you can't wait until Staya dies, Aisha said firmly. You have to make a move while the third prince is still alive. In this world, the only person who could help Jilin defeat the existence that he couldn't defeat, Aisha could only think of the third prince. As for Jilin's thoughts, Aisha didn't consider it all. She would rather believe it than not. What kind of existence was the Elf Queen? She was a top life form that had existed since ancient times. Her vision and knowledge were top-notch. Aisha didn't believe that she was wrong. Jilin closed his eyes and ignored Aisha. What Demon King? After all, he was just a creation of the God of Darkness. And Jilin was a life form on the same level as the God of Darkness. If he could inherit the position of the Dragon King, he would be able to compete with the God of Darkness. How could he be afraid of a Demon King? What a joke. Time passed quickly, and the 4 seasons rotated. In the blink of an eye, 2 seasons had passed. Once Jilin slept, he slept for 2 years. Moreover, there was no sign of him waking up. During this period, the Pope came once, but he couldn't even enter the Red Dragon City. Because when he came to the Red Dragon City, he saw the dwarfs guarding the city. The Pope was overjoyed and said that he wanted to see the Dwarf King. When the dwarfs guarding the city saw that he was the Pope, they gave him face and really called the Dwarf King over. Then the Pope asked the Dwarf King to borrow the god-slaying cannon. The Dwarf King smiled and asked how many he wanted. The Pope said that he would be able to take as many as you could borrow from him. The Dwarf King smiled and agreed. He gave the Pope 2 god-slaying cannons, wanting to kill this human who coveted the dwarf race's supreme treasure. However, the Pope was very cunning and let this evil thief escape in the end. The Dwarf King was deeply regretful about this. The past 2 years had been peaceful and prosperous. The human countries were immersed in the happiness and glory of defeating the Red Calamity. Although most people only knew about the existence of the Red Calamity after the Empire announced the victory of the war, the people of the various countries looked at the Empire's announcement and felt that they were watching a story. However, everyone was used to it. This place should be written with stories. because no matter what it was just a story for those who had never experienced it. The story was not important. The Red Calamity was not important. The unity of the various empires was not important. The Divine Dragon Empire changed to the Red Dragon Empire was not important. The orcs occupied more than half of the Nanshin Empire was not important. The birth of Holy Queen Staya was not important. Then what was important? What was important after reading the story was what was important. Chapter 379. Shengming City, Sage King Palace. This was a pure white palace, surrounded by white walls and pillars. The high dome was dotted with lamps that emitted holy light. The ground was paved with smooth, white marble, which had been polished to the point that it could be used as a mirror. There was a special array set up on the window. Even if the wind was howling outside, it would become a cool breeze after passing through this array. If one smelled it carefully, they could even smell the sun in the wind. This Sage King Palace was built when the Saimai Empire began to renovate the palace after the defeat of the Red Disaster. At that time, Staya's prestige in the Saimai Empire was unprecedented. She had the glory of slaying a dragon, the virtuous eldest princess of the empire, and the title of the Saintess of the Light. With all these added together, Staya could really be said to be popular like the sun in the sky. When the Shengming king saw this, he hesitated for a moment before abdicating and passing the throne to Staya. Thus, the first queen in the history of the Saimai Empire was born. The Shengming king originally thought that there might be some opposition. In the end, the people were overjoyed and enthusiastic. From then on, the Saimai Empire achieved perfect harmony. The Church of Light and the Empire truly became one. Staya held the scepter in her left hand and ruled the empire. In her right hand, she held the Holy Book of Light to convey the oracle and lead the Church of Light. She was already standing at the top of the light. The latecomers could only look up but could not catch up. Holy Queen Staya, who held thousands of rays of light in her hands, was sitting behind a table in the Sage King Palace, pressing her smooth forehead with her hand from time to time. In front of her, there were two groups of people standing on each side. One group was the bishops of the Church of Light, and the other group was the ministers of the Saimai Empire. At this moment, a minister was standing in the middle of the two groups, talking endlessly. Your Majesty, now that 2 years have passed, the Saimai Empire has basically stabilized, and the foundation for recuperation is more or less complete. Now, it is time to consider the matter of the Nanshin Empire. The minister's tone was impassioned and powerful. Some of the people on the left behind him nodded while others shook their heads. As for the group of people on his right, they all closed their eyes and rested. It was obvious that they were saying, "You can say whatever you want, we're just here to gather some people." The Church of Light had never interfered in the affairs of the empire. They only accepted the empire's request to help the empire's people when they were in need. For example, helping the citizens treat their illnesses, repair their houses, or kill a demonic beast. As for why these people were standing here, it was completely coincidental. At that time, a bishop came to the Sage King's palace to ask Staya about the Church of Light. Unfortunately, the timing was just right for the Staya conference. Logically speaking, he should have just waited for a while, but the identity of a bishop was highly respected in the Saimai Empire. The guards didn't want him to wait outside, so they let him in. As a result, the bishop was shocked the moment he entered. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Loud noises filled the entire Sage King's palace. Everyone was arguing. The bishop was in a daze and thought that he was in a market. After taking a closer look, the bishop confirmed that it wasn't. The people who were arguing and pointing at each other were either people who were haggling in the market or the well-mannered and elegant ministers of the empire. However, at that moment, they were like two different people. The bishop suddenly understood why the Saimai Empire had to close the doors every time they came to the conference. It wasn't because they were afraid of leaking secrets. It was because they were afraid of losing their dignity. The people below were arguing in full swing. If the people above didn't want to stop them, they could only sit and watch. The bishop didn't understand what the Staya was trying to do. He only felt extremely angry. He didn't care about the original matter anymore. He stomped his foot and turned to leave. After returning to the Holy Light Church, He told everyone that the Saint of Light was bullied. Although she was sitting on the throne of the Holy Queen, she had to endure the anger of the ministers. The people below were arguing, but the saint couldn't even say a word. When the people of the Church of Light heard this, how could they? If it was in the past, no matter how much the ministers bullied the emperor, the Church of Light wouldn't even bother to look at them. However, not now. That was the saint of the Church of Light. How could the heroes of the human race be bullied by them? For a moment, the Church of Light was filled with righteous indignation. Some of the older female bishops who were soft-hearted even secretly wiped away 2 drops of tears. After that, the Church of Light used various methods and their reputation in the Sami Empire to forcefully take half of the position in the Sami Empire's court. From then on, the ministers of the Sami Empire didn't dare to make a scene in front of the Staya. Staya sighed in her heart. The incident in the Nanshin Empire was like Jilin stabbing the human race in the back. All of the human race's strength was concentrated in front of the volcano to fight against Jilin. Only the Middle Empire had a backup plan to defend against the Red Dragon Empire. Therefore, the orcs took advantage of the Nanshin Empire's weakness and quickly took over half of the Nanshin Empire's territory. This slash was truly too powerful. With one slash, more than half of the Nanshin Empire was gone. If the new king of war hadn't quickly organized the various forces in the Nanshin Empire and stabilized his position on the throne, half of the Nanshin Empire would have been gone. Although the minister was right, the Sami Empire shouldn't ignore this matter no matter how you looked at it. Even if they didn't help the Nanshin Empire take back their territory, this matter was still profitable. However, the problem was, Staya knew that Jilin wasn't dead. She didn't want to fight against the orcs. The Middle Empire hadn't made a move yet. This meant that the third prince didn't believe that Jilin was dead either. As for the Red Dragon Empire, it was no longer part of the human camp. No one else made a move, but you did. Who do you think you are? Just as Staya was thinking of how to get away with it, a series of urgent bell sounds were heard. Clang, clang, clang. Staya suddenly stood up and looked at the door. Everyone in the palace turned to look at the door without exception. A guard moved extremely fast and ran across the entire palace in an extremely short amount of time with the bell sounds. He rushed into the palace. All the important figures immediately made way for him without exception. Reporting, Your Majesty, the ancient beacon fire has been ignited. Ancient beacon fire? Staya squinted her eyes. Of course, she knew about the ancient beacon fire. If one of these things was ignited, all the ancient beacon towers in the world would be set ablaze. Normal people couldn't ignite this thing, and no one would ignite it easily. The last time it was ignited was when Jilin broke into the sacred city and captured Staya. The sacred king ignited it. As for the previous time, it was too long ago, and the history books didn't record it in detail anymore. So, why was it ignited this time? Who ignited it? Staya asked. It seems to be spontaneous combustion, the guard stuttered and said suspiciously. Staya squinted her eyes again. This time, her eyes almost became a line, because she suddenly thought of a legend. On the day when the devil awakens and the world is about to be destroyed, the beacon fires of the world will burn together. This was a warning from God. He warned everyone that disaster was about to come. The moment of life and death was about to arrive. This was the time to fight and fight. Chapter 380. Serene, it seems like we have to put this matter aside for now. Staya looked at the minister and said, Of course, Your Majesty. The minister bowed and retreated. Bishop Jess, send someone to inform the Pope to return as soon as possible. At the same time, check the ancient books and collect clues about the fire beacon. Yes, Saintess. Send a message to the Middle Empire, the Snow Wind Empire, the Nanshin Empire, and the Red Dragon Empire. Gather the kings in the Wind Moon City. It'll be held in 3 days. Yes, Your Majesty. The Paladin army, prepare to depart at any time. Yes, Your Majesty. Ministers and bishops, do you have anything else to say about this? All right, then make your own preparations. Everyone, you must remember that this matter is related to the lives of the people in the world, and it's extraordinary. You can't be careless in the slightest. Have all of you understood? Staya suddenly became serious. She slowly scanned the room. Her gaze was like a knife. Under the influence of the Dragon Slayer hero title, these ministers actually saw a trace of murderous intent in Staya's eyes. No one dared to look at Staya for a moment. They all lowered their heads. As the Holy Queen commands, we will do our best. Staya dismissed the ministers and returned to her palace. The sunlight in the palace was bright and beautiful. The 5 floor-to-ceiling windows almost took up all the space on the wall opposite the door. The thin white curtains fluttered in the wind. There was no one in the room. This was Staya's habit. Other than the necessary cleaning that she couldn't do, she always did the rest of the things herself. Staya took out the Holy Book of Light and casually flipped to a page. A red scale slowly floated up. A huge red shadow was projected from the scale by the power of the Holy Book of Light. It instantly took up half of the palace. It was Jilin. He was sleeping on a mountain of gold, as if nothing in the outside world could affect him. Staya took a deep breath. She didn't understand why Jilin always liked to sleep on the metal. Jilin, wake up. Staya called softly. If someone else was present at this moment, they would definitely feel very strange. Not to mention that the two of them were now half an empire away. Even if the scale had the ability to transmit sound, it was indeed unrealistic to wake Jilin up by calling him Staya. Back in the Snow Wind Empire, after Jilin had accidentally fallen asleep, Aisha had released a top-tier offensive spell like Elemental Fusion in order to wake him up. But strangely, when Staya called out to him softly, Jilin actually started to slowly wake up. This was the true function of the red scale. Summon Jilin. Staya's voice sounded directly in Jilin's mind. Therefore, even though Jilin slept like a log, he was still woken up by Staya. Jilin tried hard to open his eyes. After a few attempts, he finally opened them completely. Staya thought it was a bit funny. She could actually see the word sleepy from Jilin's ferocious and majestic golden pupils. Whoa, Jilin was very surprised to see Staya. Staya, I gave you the scale. Why did you only contact me now? Yes, ever since the dragon slaying battle, these two golden partners who had deceived the entire human race had never met each other again. Even if the skies suddenly darkened for some time not long after, it was still the same. Jilin thought Staya would contact him for such a big matter, because there was no need to contact you. Staya said coldly, you still took away half of the southern Exine Empire's land in the end. What are you talking about? Many orcs died in that battle. I had to let the orcs get something, right? Jilin said. How did you make the entire human race not realize that the orcs on the volcano were only a portion of the orcs? Jilin chuckled and said proudly, you have to talk about your holy grimoire. That healing magic is really useful. No matter how injured he is, as long as he doesn't die, he can recover in a short time. Then, he can immediately return to the battlefield. This way, he could be used as two people. Jilin said happily. Obviously, being able to deceive the treacherous and cunning humans was something to be happy about. What will it take for you to return the territory to the humans? Humans can give away the money they get, but beasts won't give up on the prey they killed. Okay. Staya nodded and was surprisingly straightforward. Jilin was stunned. He didn't expect this. The demon god race is about to revive you. Staya suddenly stopped talking halfway. She wanted to ask Jilin if he knew about this, but on second thought, this guy had slept for a long time. How could he know about what just happened? But Jilin's next words were completely out of Staya's expectations. The demon god race, they're out? That's pretty fast. You know about the revival of the demon god race. Staya was shocked. Although the matter of the demon god race wasn't considered a secret in the Church of Light, only a few people knew about it, because not many people were interested in understanding those useless ancient secrets. But she was different. As the saintess, she had the responsibility of passing down the knowledge of the Church of Light, so she had to know everything. But how did Jilin know? When they first met, this guy didn't even know how to read. Yeah, I know, Jilin said. How do you know? I saw the god of darkness awaken them with my own eyes. Staya immediately thought of the sudden darkness 2 years ago. You knew about this 2 years ago? Yeah. Then why didn't you tell me? I was sleeping, and you didn't ask. No. Staya opened her eyes wide and was about to scold Jilin. Do you know what the revival of the demon god race means? I know, Jilin said lazily. Isn't it just a frozen world or the end of the world? Staya was stunned. Jilin's nonchalant attitude made her lose her temper. The revival of the demon god race requires all the races in the world to unite. This isn't just a matter of the human race. Staya's tone softened a little. Unknowingly, most of the non-human races in the world were already under Jilin's command. She had to convince Jilin about the matter of the races fighting against the demon god race together. Unite all the races? Jilin dragged out the last word, unite. His meaning was self-evident. Humans had bullied the other races for many years, and the other races' lives had just improved. Now you want to unite? Why? Humans have a saying, when the sky collapses, the tallest person will stand on it. Now it's obvious that humans are the tallest in the world. You guys can stand on it first, and we'll talk about it when you're about to collapse. Aren't you afraid that it'll be too late? Staya's face darkened. She definitely didn't teach Jilin that saying. You should have confidence in humans. Even in my opinion, the strength of humans can't be underestimated. Humans now have the third prince, mobile cities, and the Ming Shui divine weapon. And the race that has been sleeping for tens of thousands of years wants to conquer the world after crawling out of the ice. Don't you think it's ridiculous? You humans are the main race in the world. You should have the confidence to look down on the other races. You should use the time difference of tens of thousands of years to tell the demon god race that the times have changed. Jilin suddenly became righteous and impassioned. His words were full of admiration and encouragement for humans. But Staya was unmoved. When it came to using words to influence others, Sti was the master. And Jilin was simply displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. Chapter 381. Staya looked at Jilin, but couldn't say anything, because she knew clearly what Jilin thought of humans and his attitude towards them. Staya felt that it should be fine to ask him to help her alone, but to ask him to help the entire human race, or rather, to ask him to lead the other races to help the human race, Staya felt that it was indeed a bit difficult. And Staya felt that what Jilin said was not unreasonable. Humans had been developing for so many years and had been at the top of the world for so many years. Their strength was already incomparable to before. Now that they were facing a top race that had been sleeping for tens of thousands of years, Staya felt that they might be able to defeat them. But being able to defeat them was one thing. Sacrificing a lot was another. Ignoring everything else, how much help could the dwarf race bring to the humans? So they had to fight for what they should fight for, because it would save countless human lives. The end of the world is not a matter of the human race, Staya said in a low voice. Every race in the world has the responsibility to defend against the demon god race. Jilin blinked and ignored her. Who cares about you? The demon god race came from the north, so the humans should be the first to be attacked. Why didn't you think of this day when you were fighting for territory? If the demon god race comes, they'll definitely attack you humans first. We'll just watch from behind and not move. What can you do to me? We'll just watch you fight to the death. We don't care who wins. If the humans win, you'll also be greatly injured. We'll take advantage of the situation then. If the demon god race can destroy the humans, that's great too. When the time comes, Jilin will personally take action and lead the beastmen to fight against a tired army that just finished a battle. What would that be like? When the time comes, they can unify the world and fulfill the dragon race's wish. Wouldn't that be perfect? Seems like you're determined to let the humans fight first. You don't care anymore? Staya said. Jilin still ignored her. No matter what you say, why should I care? You said before that if the sky falls, the tall ones will hold it up. That's right, Staya suddenly said, but I like another way of saying this. With great power comes great responsibility. Jilin, in this world, you are the tallest and most capable one. Jilin suddenly turned his head and looked at Staya. His golden eyes were slightly brighter. Staya looked straight into Jilin's eyes. Her eyes were clear and bright, and she didn't move at all. Jilin sometimes found it strange that Staya could look into his eyes without a trace of fear or retreat. Staya's strength was not the best among the humans that Jilin had met, but she was the only one who could face him without fear like Staya. Even Aisha would lean back slightly when she suddenly made eye contact with him. As for Bane, he was even more screwed. It was already a miracle that he wasn't directly sitting on the ground after such a long time. But to Jilin, that was a normal reaction. But Staya, she had never shown any signs of retreat in front of him. Some humans in the legends were like this. You could kill her, but you couldn't make her take a step back. Was this what humans always said? With a clear heart and a firm mind, one could be fearless? Jilin clearly realized that he couldn't suppress Staya with his eyes anymore. I want to help you. Do it myself? Jilin said. If you are willing to help, that would be the best result, Staya said. Staya, did you forget something? Jilin suddenly said. What? You are the dragon-slaying hero now. If I were to make a move, wouldn't your illustrious reputation be ruined? Staya was now known as the Holy Queen. She controlled the Simi Empire with one hand and the Church of Light with the other. No matter what, Staya was the most powerful human. She also had the title of dragon-slaying hero and was respected by billions of people. Jilin, who had slept for 2 years, didn't know any of this. But he could imagine how bright Staya would be 2 years later. Humans love things like heroes and saviors. Once one appeared, people would crazily follow them and treat them as a religion. They would elevate them to the position of God. Staya was now on the high altar. But once she was on the altar, it was difficult to come down. She could either stay on the altar for the rest of her life and not eat anything, or she could fall. The higher the altar, the more painful the fall. And with Staya's height, the fall would probably be very ugly. Jilin didn't believe that Staya wouldn't have thought of this. But what she was doing now was like using a sword to cut down the altar under her feet. She was destroying her own plan. If the situation back then really required you to do it, it would be worth it even if I lost my reputation, Staya said without any hesitation. This caused Jilin to feel somewhat helpless. You couldn't do anything about this kind of person. She didn't have herself in her heart, only righteousness and the people of the world. You could disagree with her in your heart and criticize her in your heart, but you couldn't say anything against her. No. Jilin shook his head and refused. Staya's eyes dimmed. She was a little disappointed, but she wasn't surprised. Jilin's refusal was expected. Just as Staya said before, every race and every life in this world had a responsibility to fight against the demon god race. But only Jilin didn't. It was obvious that he wasn't a creature of this world. All right, you can't do it, but can you lend me the god-killing cannon? It had to be said that the Saintess and the Pope were both top existences of the Church of Light. They had some chemistry. They both stared at the dwarf race's strongest weapon at the same time. Unfortunately, Jilin shook his head again. Firstly, the dwarf race is very determined not to lend the god-killing cannon to the humans. You know that they aren't my subordinates. They're just neighbors who have a good relationship with me. They don't listen to my orders, so I can't do anything about it. Secondly, the god-killing cannon's energy source comes from magma. There's no problem using it on this volcano, but if it's moved elsewhere, it'll be a pile of scrap metal. In other words, you humans can't use it even if it's given to you. Staya looked coldly at Jilin. She naturally knew about the second condition, and she already had a plan in mind. But she couldn't deny that the first condition Jilin mentioned was a little tricky. It seemed like she had to discuss this with the Dwarf King. In 3 days, the humans will hold a meeting of the kings in the Snow Wind Empire. Let Flay represent the Red Dragon Empire. Staya wasn't asking this time. She was negotiating. That was her bottom line. There were 5 great empires in the human race. How could you not come to one? Moreover, the humans were isolated and without help. The humans should make full use of their own strength. Jilin thought for a moment. That's fine. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.